I don't think that people understand the magnitude of China's power. People don't understand it because it hasn't been used yet. We're in a situation like the Europeans were in like the 1910s, where America had this industrial might that was just incomprehensibly larger than everybody else. But Europeans didn't understand that this could be used for war. China can produce 200 times the number of ships America can. They haven't even started to build artillery yet, but in terms of missiles, they can produce so many more missiles than we can. China's manufacturing right now, in terms of actual gross value added, in terms of the actual price people pay for stuff, is greater than the United States and Europe combined. In 5 years, China built more high-speed rail than exists in the rest of the world, counting Japan, counting Europe, all those countries together, combined. China went from no presence in the car industry to being the world's largest exporter of autos, largest auto exporter in 3 years. You cannot imagine the size of the factories, the amount of labor and capital and resources that goes into this stuff. Can we choke off their oil with a blockade? No, we can't. Don't have the technological capability to do that. Even if we did, in a war situation, China can easily make oil from coal, as Nazi Germany did, to keep them going for several years while they annihilate our military by just overwhelming it. People do not understand the magnitude of China's power because it hasn't used it yet.
Are you the guy on Twitter that hates Gen Z?
No.
Oh, never mind. Okay.
I like Gen Z. They seem nice.
How's it going?
Going all right. Wait, you don't remember me?
Yeah, of course I do. It was a joke because everybody that talks about economics online and the vibe session and blah, 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 like all the young people are super mad right now. They want everybody to convince that the economy is the worst it's ever been and there's no hope for the future of millennials and blah, blah, blah. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. How have you been doing?
See this eyes in this video. I'm doing all right. Yeah, just taking care of Rabbit, living in beautiful San Francisco. Yeah.
Well, what are we talking about today, Wick?
Oh, am I leading this discussion? I don't know. So Noah and I were talking, and he mentioned that he wanted to talk geopolitics with you.
Oh.
And so I have some subjects if you want, but if Noah's got something in particular, I'm fine to let him take the lead. It's up to you.
Actually, I thought that you had some things that you wanted to talk about.
Fair enough.
Wow, baited us completely into here.
Great.
Wait, I guess before,
Totally.
hold on.
Let's do it.
If you don't have any strong opinions, well, how do you feel? I'm curious, Noah. How do you feel for the upcoming election season?
Well, I'm not incredibly happy about it because I'm not a big Trump fan.
Do you think Trump? Do you think he's looking good right now?
I mean, he's in the last week, Biden has started to look stronger in the polls, but then large numbers of people, are going to vote for Trump, and he's been looking strong in the polls. And he's not a popular figure. I think people just have this, undefined, floating dissatisfaction that a lot of them are taking out by saying, "Oh, I'm going to vote for Trump." I think that's the electorate is in a bad mood. America is in a bad mood.
Mm-hmm.
And that makes me sad. I don't want to see America in a bad mood.
Sure. I feel like a lot of that tracks with the the consumer sentiment and the feelings about the economy and how people's personal finances, everything are doing. Do you think as that turns around, or do you think it's going to continue to turn around? Do you think that's going to have a significant impact on the upcoming election, or is there still I
think it absolutely will. I mean, this is the best economy we've had since the 1990s,
Mm-hmm.
which is older than most people can now remember. And like that, I can vaguely remember it. I was a kid. It was a very good time, but this is as good as the economy gets.
Mm-hmm.
Inflation is low. People still remember what something used to cost in 2019, and they're mad because when you go see, a piece of fruit cost more than it cost in 2019, you're like, wow, inflation. But then eventually that fades from people's minds. After like a year, people see that fruit price is no longer changing. It's no longer going up.
Yeah.
And they're like, okay, inflation sort of fades from their mind. We actually have evidence that it takes about 2 years total for this to really fade from people's mind, and it'll be like 2 years this summer since inflation really started to fall.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think a lot of people, it'll be farther from people's mind, and the fact that everybody who wants a job has a job basically at this point.
Yeah.
And jobs are better than they've been. Wages are going up. They took a hit. Wages took a hit in 2022, but now they're going up, and income's going up, wealth going up, stocks going up. For those of you who own stocks, like for those of you who observe stock day, it's stocks going up, and so I think it's going to filter through. It's going to eventually make its way into people's minds that these are really good times. And I think that will do something. I don't think that's going to sweep Biden to victory on a tidal wave of economic optimism, but I think it's going to have an effect on the margin.
Okay. Do you just a quick, a quick thing on econ, because that's something I'm not as informed in, but I'm very interested in. I'm sure you've watched over the past 2 years as there's been the constant prediction every single day for the recession that we're always headed for. Then there's been this obsession of economists who are pouring through data, trying to figure out where is all the economic anxiety coming from, because the Twitter sentiment seems to be so horrible and the social media sentiment seems to be so horrible. And now all of it is kind of flipping around, and people are maybe it was, I know the Vibe session was really popular on X for a long time. A theory that I read the other day, I think this was also on Twitter, it might have been on a subreddit, that was floated, was that maybe one thing that we're seeing is an emergence of a homeowner versus renter economy, to where these are two disparate groups of people that are going to be treated very differently. Do you think there's any truth to that? Low interest rates and asset appreciation are helping homeowners, but if you're a renter, you're kind of in a weird, screwed place right now?
Rent has been going down. Mm-hmm. And so
is that true? Wait, really? Well, actually, I just said yes. But...
Yeah, rent's been going down for about a year.
Oh.
No, I don't mean the pace of increase has been going down. I mean the actual number has been going down for about a year in America.
Is it out of curiosity? Is it at a place that's more or less than the 2-3 years ago, when Trump was? So you say it's going down, compared.
Can you speak up a little?
Yeah, your mic is really quiet. Your mic is pretty quiet.
Wait. Yeah. Can you turn up your mic a little bit?
Let me see what I can do. Hold on. Is this better?
Yeah.
Yes. A little better.
A little better? Okay. Well, I'll just talk louder if I can. My mic's really shit. I apologize.
Yeah. You got to use that professor voice to lecture to
Exactly. I got to project, as they would say. Yeah. So when you say that the rent is going down, just as a lower number, compared to what, is it at the level that it was, say, in 2020? Is it lower, higher? What are we talking here?
Well, it's back to I think the level it was in 2021, in terms of where it is. The thing is that there's several different rent indices. There's new rent, if you're just signing a lease now. There's rent, considering all the people who are still on lease, and stuff like that. And so I think that the new rent, rent if you're just now starting to sign a lease is pretty back down. Might be back. So 2020 is a weird year to compare to, because rent really crashed during COVID.
Sure.
And so that's a weird year. But I think that so comparing to 2021 is probably a better comparison. Maybe 2019.
Well, I wanted to do it during Trump's tenure, just again, since we're talking about the economy and we're talking about the election, Biden's chances, Trump's chances. I'm just trying to get, because a lot of the things I hear from people are this idea that the economy is doing better isn't being felt, right? It's not being felt by the public. I'm not sure how true that is, but it is something that I consistently hear.
I just think people don't feel it overnight. You know what I mean? I think people, rent goes down across the country. That's an average. Some people's rent drops. Some people's rent goes up. Some people's rent stays the same. And I think that, if more people's rent goes down than goes up, we economists aggregate those statistics and say, oh, rent went down, right? Median rent went down, average rent went down, whatever you want to say. But most people don't necessarily experience those declines. Those declines only happen for some people. So you've got to, either hear, if you're not one of the people for whom that decline happens. I mean, first of all, 2/3 of households are homeowners in this country, right? So those people that, they don't care about the rent going down. So you're talking about 1/3 of people who might even care about this to begin with.
Yeah.
Right. And then if 1 out of 5 of those gets a rent decrease, and 1 out of 7 gets a rent increase, that means total rents go down, but it still means that, the 1 out of 7 are like, my rent went up, and then the 1 out of 5 people get a rent cut. And but that's 1 out of 5 of 1 out of 3 is 1 out of 15 people in the country gets their rent cut, and then so it's I think it's a real thing. It'll filter through, but it won't be this like tidal wave of happiness that just crashes over the country immediately.
Here's a question as well, and I'm running on intuition. I could be wrong. My guess is going to be that if you have a unit and the market value rent for that unit increases, you're probably going to increase the rent burden on your renter. My guess is going to be that if there's a decrease, I don't know if you would actually cut their rent, or if they move out, you would just list it for the lower rent instead. Like, I feel like there's probably a higher chance that you would charge the higher price. I don't know how often landlords cut rent. So that could be the case too, that if you are increasingly, if your rent is increasing, you see it go up. But if you're moving into a unit whose rent is decreased, you have no idea what it costs before. You just see like a listed unit for whatever price. That'd be my guess. I could be wrong on that. But
that is smart. That's right. Yeah. No, you're absolutely right.
One also,
so you have to look at the people who like moved to a new place and they're like, wow, my new place is cheaper, but it's actually kind of nice. Wow, I got a good place for cheap. Mm-hmm. Which is my situation. I recently moved into a good place for cheap.
Yeah. One thing that I noticed, I noticed this in general politics when it comes to polling on certain issues, and now I'm applying it more to economic and really probably everything. Is granularity is really important when you're doing metrics. Like when you have like a statement like, oh, what does wage growth look like for the entirety of the United States? Or what does like rent look like for the entirety of the United States? That oftentimes these numbers are entirely meaningless at best, sometimes incredibly misleading at worst, or downright lies, depending on how you aggregate or disaggregate data too. So that's also another thing that I've been keeping a closer eye on, that sometimes the broad aggregates miss a lot of the stories that would be seen if you were more granular with your, I guess, charts or data collecting.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, that's right. So I think that, but I think we're starting to see it make its way into the economic statistics. We're starting to see consumer confidence go up. Last month was like the biggest single month jump that we've seen in a really long time. I think the best comparison is to look at the data from the 80s. Now, to go see what it was actually like in the 80s, we'd have to go ask some old people, right? Because no one remembers. None of us are old enough to remember, what it was like to, work and buy a house or whatever in 1983. Like I'm old, but I'm not that old. So like, but when you look at the consumer confidence, you see that it was really in the dumps. They had inflation, this massive inflation of the 70s that lasted for a long time. Then you had raising interest rates a ton, and so like it was very hard to buy a house for a few years there. And then you saw massive unemployment from that. Yeah. You saw just a big recession from that. And then, so of course, consumer confidence was way in the dumps. And then it started to rise, in 1983. You just see it start to like go up. And then like over 1983, over that year, it just absolutely soars. It flips from completely negative to completely positive as inflation goes down and as interest rates get cut as a result. I think what'll have to happen is we'll have to start to see, to really get the same surge here, we'll have to start to see the cutting of interest rates. So I think a lot depends on the Fed, whether or not the Fed decides that inflation is enough in the rear view mirror where we can afford to cut now, or whether or not we need to keep rates high for a while just to make people absolutely sure that inflation is not coming back, like double tap the inflation.
Well, I think it's also important when we think about inflation, we're really thinking about like a rate of change. And we need to remember that there is an underlying function that has to be taken into account because the cumulative effects on inflation are felt, right? So like if inflation is 10% year over year over year over year for like a whole year, right? If you get 10% inflation and then the next year it comes down to 1%, it's like, oh, look, inflation is below our target. That's good. Well, the cumulative effects of that inflation are still going to be felt. The lingering effects are going to be onwards until wage growth outpaces it eventually. So I think it's probably okay considering how much inflation we've had. I think the cumulative is still pretty high, although certain sectors of wage growth I think have started to outpace cumulatively where it was, but it's probably good as long as we're not seeing big unemployment. I don't know why we would like rush to cut rates now,
Well, I mean, it could be that, so the reason they might cut rates is that the longer you keep rates high, the more stress it puts on certain economic sectors, and you risk, so the economy's doing great and inflation's come down, But if we keep rates high for a long time, we might kill the commercial property sector, because commercial property sector is already hurting. If you're like a developer, you own like office buildings, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or a developer, just an owner of office buildings. That's what you do. You're hurting because your entire business relies on being able to borrow to buy buildings, to renovate buildings, and those borrowing rates are high. At the same time, the demand has gone down because remote work
from home.
Right?
Yeah,
people aren't going to the office as much anymore. They've returned to the office somewhat, but not a ton, and so that is sort of a structural thing that's hurting the commercial property sector. And so if you pile on the commercial property sector with interest rates, you could have a lot of those property developers go bust. At that point, banks, the United States banking sector has shifted away from lending to industrial companies, software companies, whatever. Those people all go to the bond markets to borrow, right? They get money by issuing bonds. And so if you go to if you're a bank, who's borrowing money from banks? Well, real estate. That's who borrows money from banks. It's a developer. And so banks, our big banks, have a ton of these commercial property loans on their books. They always did. They always have. This isn't a situation like 2007 where they had all these subprime loans on their books, right? They loaned to reputable commercial property developers with very, very good financials. But what was a very, very good financial in 2019 is no longer a very good financial right now, because rates are just a lot higher than anyone realized they were going to go. And also the remote work thing. Those are two things that in 2019 no one could have predicted. No one was predicting either of those things.
Yeah.
And so, because COVID just came out of nowhere. And so the thing is, if you leave interest rates high for 1 year, that's one thing. If you leave interest rates high for 5 years or 3 years, maybe, you might just crack the commercial property sector. You get bad loans. Banks stop, lending. The real estate sector sort of goes in the toilet because banks stop lending, and then that filters through to the rest of the economy, and we get a recession, right?
Well, would banks stop lending completely, even for like residential loans and stuff, or would they just like cut back on the commercial lending?
Well, that's a great question. So the answer is that if it's only a bit, if the commercial property sector only suffers a bit, then they'll just cut down on that sector.
Yeah.
But if the commercial property sector suffers a lot, they'll cut back on everything because of capital adequacy. So,
because you have to maintain a certain reserve in order to guarantee your whatever. Yeah. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I would say, obviously, I'm just circle jerking. I'm pretty sure we both agree, but like, obviously they should be careful that we don't want to cut rates to influence the entire economy just to stave off what could be an inevitable collapse of commercial real estate anyway, too, right? I don't know how big the work from home threat is to commercial real estate. I just read headlines and articles where people say that like the restructuring of work has dramatically and forever altered the office workspace. And if that's true, then I mean, like, that sector is probably going to fundamentally change regardless. Yeah.
It is. Mm-hmm. We would like to let it down gently instead of letting, you don't want to take a sector that's structurally shrinking and hit it over the head with a sledgehammer to the point where people are waiting for unemployment lines in the cities of America.
Yeah.
Like, there's no need for that.
Yeah.
We don't. That's resolving sunsetting old sectors is not worth unemployment lines. Mm-hmm. So, like, the Fed.
Well, hey, listen, we're at 3.5% unemployment right now. Listen, there's a lot of jobs available. Okay, we can't bring in immigrants apparently to fill them. So, maybe those commercial guys can go get a job, a different job. But yeah,
they will. We just want them to do it gradually. Sure. It's I guess the thing is that commercial property defaulting and is deflationary. That puts downward pressure on prices. Mm-hmm. Also, the other reason to cut, by the way, is that we're now seeing an acceleration of productivity growth. So this is something the Fed pays attention to, but most normal people don't. Mm-hmm. It's productivity growth is when workers produce more per hour, mm-hmm. right? And so we saw it. There was it's been wacky all over the place because of the people who got hired and fired, during and after COVID.
Yeah.
But now for the last 3 quarters, it's been growing really fast. Mm-hmm. It's been consistently growing fast, and what that means is workers are producing more, and that's probably because companies invested in a lot of new technology, and companies also remote work is probably helping because people are moving to cheaper locations, and there's a number of reasons I could go on, blah blah bullshit, but but labor productivity is high, and with that's a deflationary pressure that allows the Fed to lower interest rates without creating inflation. that the deflationary pressure from workers producing more per hour from productivity at companies going up allows the Fed to cut interest rates without bringing back the specter of inflation. And that's good. We want that. That's ultimately productivity is what makes our economy healthy. It's what makes us rich people and what makes our country a rich country that can afford to have all this nice stuff. And it's the long-term driver of growth. And that's what allows the Fed to cut interest rates. So the fact that productivity is growing so strongly, if it grows strongly for one more quarter, I think the Fed is probably going to say, you know what, we've got some room to cut rates here. I think that's a factor that people aren't paying attention to.
So I get that you're pretty bullish, right? You're pretty excited and optimistic about the economy. I guess I'd just ask, do you see any causes for what would be your main things that is happening that is giving you pause, that is okay, we should really look at this might be a warning sign, this might be something that shows that maybe the growth we're having isn't as strong as we might think? Is there anything like that you see or are aware of that might be suggesting anything like that, or is it just all blue skies from here on out?
Well, you never have all blue skies in any economy. You can always find something. So I would, obviously the commercial property sector, as I said, is the main worry. I think everyone agrees that there are strains building up there. You see a whole lot of companies in the real estate field who are struggling with the interest costs that they have to pay. It's not even just commercial.
Wait. Can I ask a quick question? Because this might be really relevant. When it comes to commercial loans, are these usually done on adjustable rate, or are these usually done on fixed rate?
Some of each, but
just because I'm wondering, when you keep saying that they're
common.
when you're saying they're feeling like the pressure of interest rates, I'm curious if their rates are adjusting along with the federal funds rate or whatever. So that's a huge pressure, or if you're just saying new acquisitions of loans are becoming increasingly difficult and driving people out of, I guess, commercial real estate or whatever. Yeah, okay, just checking.
Both, but the thing is that even if you have fixed rate loans, these companies aren't taking 30-year fixed rate loans like residential mortgage does. They're taking 5-year, maybe 10-year loans.
Okay.
But businesses don't take 30-year loans unless you're a nuclear power plant taking a loan from the government.
Sure.
Okay. You're not supposed to take 30 years to pay off your investment in a business.
Gotcha.
So they're taking 5-year loans, and so what you see is people who have fixed rate loans there's some percent have to roll that over every year. That is a good question, and it's an important question. I don't know the number off the top of my head, but I do know that the fixed rate loans are of much shorter term typically, and that those have to roll over faster. So you get some people who took out a 5-year loan, but this is the year the 5-year loan is up, and now they've got to go re-borrow if they want to continue their business. So there's some people who are 2019, it's 2024. This is 5 years since 2019. So if you borrowed I guess, loans were...
I'm sorry.
Loans were,
I'm asking you super basic questions. When you say they have to borrow more, are you implying that they're just taking out loans to lease the office space, or why would they have to borrow more? Or is it for an expansion, or...
So if you're a developer, you have to keep doing business. Your business is not to take out a one-time loan, build a building, and then sit on that for the rest of your life as a business. You continue operations.
From the developer point of view, you're talking from the developer, not from the business owner that buys the place. Okay, I understand. Gotcha. Okay, gotcha. Okay.
Yep, exactly.
Right.
It's the developers. It's not the right. The businesses are rent. They rent the offices.
Gotcha.
You don't buy your own office. You rent your own, unless you're Google.
Do they rent from developers, or do developers sell to leasers, like major
leasers?
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. And then the developers need to go do more business. You're a business. You're not like I did this one project and I made some money and now I'm going to go watch TV. You could, but no, you're going to do more business. Developers are going to continue to develop, and then leasers have to renovate.
Sure.
Right? If you own this office, you've got to, pay upkeep and pay property tax and renovate stuff to make it nicer or whatever. And then if there's demand shifts, you've got to redo your offices to be a thing for a different company. Or you've got to, if you go in an office building, you'll see a lot of work being done on the offices that aren't currently leased out. So someone has to pay for that. And of course you have to borrow money to pay for taxes and stuff. You have to borrow money for overnight stuff. It's a short-term loan that's not as important. but yeah, no. So I like these companies are all doing continuous business, and they do have a continuous stream of borrowing, right? They don't just like, most of these companies are not sort of like, it's not like a one-time project where you borrow money, you do a thing, and that's your whole business. You just borrowed once.
Yeah, I understand.
Right.
Gotcha.
I'm going to be real with you. I prepared nothing on economic questions, but I got plenty of geopolitical.
That's fun.
Yeah, we can do geopolitics. That's fine.
Okay.
Or I guess just as a
Jasmine's
final.
good. His
I wanted to
instincts are
make sure
quite good on all
that you
this.
have enough to. I want you to satisfy your curiosity.
Yeah, I will satisfy. I guess it's just my final question before we hop on anything else. So I guess my feeling for the upcoming elections was my fear is I'm speaking from a general American position, not mine personally. I don't think the general Americas. I don't think we care at all about foreign politics for foreign policy or foreign politics for more than like a month or two. I feel like it fades pretty quickly, and things like the economy or certain social issues are things that we feel all the time as Americans. So my feeling has always been that. Like the biggest popularity hit that Biden took probably revolved around Afghanistan, but we're pretty far away from that now. My biggest fear has been that if people still feel like it's bad, we're in a pretty rough spot for the upcoming election. But my feeling is that assuming the economy continues to turn around, I feel like Biden has actually a straight shot, easy shot to winning the election. He's running against somebody he's already beaten. This guy's facing so many, indictments, just all the weird stuff around him. Trump is just not, I don't think is very good. Like it might energize him with his core fans, but it certainly doesn't appeal to people in the middle. I guess my general feeling was that, and it seems like you feel the same, that the economy is in a pretty good spot and is continuing to head in that direction. As long as something bad happens economically, I'm really bullish on the election in terms of supporting Biden, but maybe on the geopolitical front, you'll feel differently or something.
We should. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No. Go ahead.
You're the owner of this channel.
I'm the owner of this channel. I don't think this is how this works. Have your thought. Like I guess for me, I am concerned about the election coming up. I am. I don't know if I'm super bullish. There are too many unknowns. Like we say that foreign policy is just going to be a flash in the pan. I think that there are so many fires burning now. We have Ukraine going on, some possible strikes against Iran, right, coming up. The issues with China and Taiwan that are always kind of ever present nowadays. I don't know if this goes away, and I don't know where the public lands on this, right? Let's talk about, I guess, to start it off and to go into the geopolitical era here, let's talk about Ukraine, right? We are having problems passing unless it passed today, and I'm not sure about it, right? But there's a funding for Ukraine. How long do we continue that? What do you think, Noah?
So funding for Ukraine, I think that there's the that's an interesting question. In the long term, Russia, the war, the intense war of tanks trying to take big pieces of territory and missiles crashing into cities at large numbers, that may stop, right? But I think that technologically what we've seen is that it's very difficult for countries to take territory now. So it'll be very, very, very difficult for Russia to just roll over all of Ukraine, unless Ukraine gets completely exhausted and has no ammunition left to fire. They could do it, but I just don't think it's likely. We're in a World War I sort of situation, and you just didn't see countries roll over other countries in World War I at all. You saw countries just give up out of exhaustion. But then I don't think Ukraine's going to be able to easily take back the pieces of Ukraine that Russia still occupies, which is about 1/5 of the country. So Russia occupied 1/5 of Ukraine, and they're going to get to keep it, at least for the foreseeable future. And all the pro-Ukraine people are like, no, go take back all the land. No, you can say that, and you can keep shooting at the Russians, but you're not going to take back that land anytime soon unless Russia collapses and Putin gets his head eaten by a bear or something, and so that's not going to happen. And it's reached a stalemate, and as long as both sides continue to get supplies of ammunition, that stalemate is going to persist for quite a while. The question is, who is going to keep supplying Ukraine? The answer is going to have to be Europe. And it's not because America, it's not because even if we re-elect Biden, it's going to have to be Europe in the long term, because America has a bigger challenge, which is China. China's like this 800-pound gorilla looming over geopolitics and conflict and stuff, and we are finding ourselves massively outproduced by China and increasingly outspent by China, which is not a place we expected to be years ago, although we should have if we had been smart, but we weren't. So now here's China's, Taiwan. A conflict over Taiwan is something we'll get involved in much more directly than the conflict over Ukraine. Right? Ukraine, we sent weapons, we sent some money. Mostly, we just sent old weapons, and that's almost all of what our aid was to them. But then with China, it's going to be a much bigger deal. We'll be involved more. We're going to need to husband our resources for that, because we're not in a good place in terms of how much we can produce militarily. Our defense industrial base is shrunken and withered, and can't produce many ships and shells and missiles. Not enough. We submarines, things like, we're just not producing them nearly as much as we should. We're going to get distracted to Asia. Asia is more important. We also may get distracted to stuff like the Middle East, which I don't want us to get distracted to. I want us to stay out of the Middle East as much as we can. But things like the Houthi militia in Yemen shooting at ships, going to distract us too, inevitably, as much as I might whine about it. And so we're going to get distracted. Europe has one security challenge, and it's Vladimir Putin, right? They have one security challenge. Europe has 3 times the people of Russia. The EU has 3 times the people of Russia, and it's got 10 times the GDP. It's got lots more manufacturing capacity. It is able to hold off Russia in terms of giving enough ammunition and supplies and money to the Ukrainians. It is able to hold off Russia in the long term, and it needs to just do it, because ultimately, the United States is not going to be the security guarantor for countries that could fund their own defense but just don't feel in the mood to do so. Right now, the reason Europe is not in immediate danger is because the reason, like, the EU and NATO is not in immediate danger is because the Ukrainians are taking all the hits. They're like the frontline troops, right? But if they get rolled over, if they do go down, if they do get rolled over, Putin's he's going for Estonia. That's in their plans. It's public. They say it. So you have to say, oh, they couldn't be serious about doing that. That's a NATO country. Well, okay, fine, but that's happening. They say they're going to do it. If they don't get stopped there, they go on to the other Baltic countries and then Poland. This is in their plans. It just they're basically their idea is keep going until they get stopped. And right now they've been stopped. They've been stopped in Ukraine. If that barrier crumbles,
I'm just saying that sounds like. The
question is, what's the next barrier?
That sounds like we should be like pouring everything we can into Ukraine to stop that from happening. If that's what you are saying that they want to do and that they're planning to do and that they're trying to do.
If Asia didn't exist, then yeah, that would be right.
Okay, fair enough. What do you think, Destiny?
God, I am so bullish on foreign policy. I'm about to give a lot of big macro takes, and I might be totally wrong in the future, and some of this is based on my history, so let's go. Okay, so firstly, I think if we compare the conflicts we're into today with the conflicts that we were in like 5 years ago, I think we're in a way better spot. So one, okay, the pullout was rough, but thank God we are out of Afghanistan, okay? That was a dead end. No offense to all of the suffering people there now. They live under the Taliban. That sucks. I agree. Unfortunately, not our responsibility to build that country, okay? So we're out of Afghanistan. That's good. Thank God. I'm pretty sure as of like 2021, we basically completely disengaged from Iraq, which is good. Thank God. Done with that. I don't think we have very much active operations anymore in Syria, which is good. Thank God. And I'm pretty sure Biden pulled us out of that Saudi-led coalition to just be doing the crazy support for everything happening in Yemen. Thank God. When I look at the foreign policy things that we are involved in today, I think the missions, I don't know how easy it is to sell to the American public, but I think the missions are a lot more noble. When you look at Ukraine, sending weapons, sending money, whatever to Ukraine is a worthy investment on like 3 different levels. Geopolitically, it's important for Europe to not get invaded by Russia. It's important for Putin to realize that he can't actually just invade whatever country he wants and do whatever he wants without significant pushback, both internationally and domestically, right? People forget, but how do you pronounce that guy's name? Prigozhin or whatever the fuck, Prigozhin, the guy that tried to,
Prigozhin.
that mutiny him. And God, unfortunately for him, I think he was flying, and I think the plane he was in accidentally got shot by a missile. Crazy how that happened. He got blown up. But so domestic pressure, international pressure, economic pressure, military pressure. I think as long as we can pour money or used weapons into Ukraine, I think it's probably a good investment, because it's like the easiest way. It's like every time we send stuff to Ukraine, it's just like you're pushing the fuck Russia button, I think, which is good as long as it remains a worthwhile investment, and as long as the Ukrainians have a desire to fight, and as long as it's not like causing that country to fall into complete and total chaos, a la Syria or Yemen.
Just to question you on the Ukraine take, right?
Yeah.
So you mentioned in the Ben Shapiro debate, right, that it's important not to give Zelensky a blank check, right?
I think we can't stay there forever, and it can't be like infinite funding into a black hole.
Question.
Yeah,
right.
But I don't.
Question.
I think
where's the line for you? At what point does it cease to become a good investment from a domestic standpoint? So I'm not talking about whether Ukraine has the will to fight or things but from a domestic policy standpoint, at what point do we say, okay, we put a lot into this?
Yeah, I think if we get to the point in Ukraine to where Ukrainians are losing the will to fight, gains on the ground are non-existent, and it's grinding into a, what do they say? It switched from a maneuverable conflict or maneuvering conflict to a positional conflict. If it grinds down to that and nothing is happening, then at some point you kind of look for an off-ramp. I don't think we're there yet. And I think when you look for the future of the military between both Russia and Ukraine, unless I'm missing something, I don't think the story ever gets any better on Russia's end. Maybe I'm discounting their military prowess, but when you're, knocking on North Korea's door, asking for munitions, I think you're in a much worse spot than Ukraine, who are getting trained up on F-15s, are potentially getting access to more and more advanced weaponry from the United States, getting more support from Europe. I feel like Ukraine still has a brighter future ahead of it in terms of what potential military support could look like. I think the sun is setting on Russia's military future in terms of at least we can do this or that. I don't know if there's a bright tomorrow for Russia. I don't know if it gets any better for them ever. So I think as long as we feel like we can continue to make investments in Ukraine and it's stopping Russia, I would say it's a good investment. Obviously there's going to be a line to that somewhere, but are they F-16s? I thought we were doing F-15s first. I don't know. So I think the Ukraine-Russia, I think that's a worthy, good cause to support. It's not a random Middle East thing where we don't even know, blah, 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 blah. I think it's a good support.
Agree.
Yeah. The mission in Yemen.
The agree button.
Yes, thank you. The mission in Yemen, I think right now is good. If the United States had any mission ever where we were the good guys, it would be ensuring global trade. If there was ever a time where the full force and brunt of the 7 million aircraft carrier, it's 13 or whatever, but the aircraft carriers we have, the Navy we've got all the biggest, we've got 3 of the largest air forces and navies in the world. If you look at blah, 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 this is what they should be used for. My understanding is, at least as of a few days ago, I don't think we've killed a single Yemeni citizen yet in terms of our strikes on missile platforms. I think we just blew up a surface-to-air missile in Yemen. Those are good missions, and I think the entire world appreciates those missions. So much so that when the UN Security Council was voting, in favor of or to abstain, even China was they tried to scold us, you guys better be careful, but they didn't vote no on it because even they realized that, the peace deal that they've kind of crafted between the Emiratis, the Saudis, and Yemen kind of rests on the ability of the United States to stop this bullshit that's happening right now, and the Strait of Aden or whatever. Yeah, so I think that mission is good. And then for Israel-Palestine, listen, it's Israel-Palestine. What do you want me to say, okay? Hopefully, at least the civilian deaths have decreased from the initial invasion days, where sometimes we had days where Israel was killing 1,000 Palestinians. Hopefully this conflict starts to wind down. I feel like the Middle East is slowly moving in a good direction. We just have to figure out the Palestinian thing, but that's not going to get figured out until the Iranian thing happens. But at least when we look at our support for Israel-Palestine and we look at bombing Houthi missile bases, I think that our mission right now in the Middle East is way more noble than when we were in Afghanistan, Iraq, and kind of sort of Syria, where everything was a clusterfuck. And the Ukraine support, I think, is good too. So and then also, this is just my age. I'm 35. This is not based in logic at all. But since I was 1 year, I remember when I came out of the womb, they were delivering me, Omaha, Nebraska. And I came out of the womb, I was crying. The doctor hit me and he turned me over, and I saw on TV, China, huge threat, looming threat tomorrow. I've heard this for 35 years. I keep hearing it, that China's ready to take over the world. They're poised to do this, and every single time they're on the way to do it, shit just seems to be falling apart for China, That Belt and Road Initiative was supposed to take over the world, and then you hear well, actually, they mismanaged the out of this. Or, they've unleashed their population. They can have more children, but now they run into middle class problems. Or today, China's about to take over Taiwan and all this, but now they're having like an economic like collapse in terms of like the stuff that they're dealing with right now in China. Yeah. So
I've been reading a lot on this.
Sure.
Subject.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I might be too optimistic, but I would say foreign policy wise, I am super, 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 super bullish right now. I feel good about everything. I don't know if Noah disagrees maybe on the China takes, but yeah, that's my feeling.
Well, I mean, to Noah, right? Like I know I've heard you've said it on my show, right? That we should just pivot away from the Middle East, right?
Have I said that?
No, Noah.
Oh,
I'm talking to you, Destiny. Sorry,
my bad.
Not all about you.
Sorry,
okay?
I feel that way sometimes.
A little bit, okay? Yeah, you said on my show, right, that we need to just pivot away from the Middle East entirely, right? What does that mean exactly? Do we divest from Israel, right? Do we just stop supporting anyone in that region? What do you mean by pivot away?
So one thing that you'll notice is that we're sending very little aid right now to Israel. We during the time we sent Israel all this military aid, our aid was about 17% of their defense budget at max in a strong year, right? And you go back to like the 1990s, and Israel is completely dependent on America for its security, right? We fund their military. Then Israel got rich, right? They got rich on the software industry, and now that Israel basically, buy its own military, and we gave them money primarily. We didn't give them that many advanced weapons. They were good at making advanced weapons. We just gave them money to buy imported components and stuff that they needed for this, and keep their fiscal situation, blah, blah, blah. Now Israel can fight on its own. And we have actually, Congress has blocked supplemental Israel funding for this war. We have not, only aid we've given to them was by executive order. We gave them a few shells, and it was not a large number. We transferred them from like our stockpiles, like we do to Ukraine, but a smaller number. So we gave them like a little bit of aid, but we gave them almost no aid really, and they can fight on their own. And the idea that, there's a lot of countries where we basically have small bases to stop Iranian militias. So Iran can't fight on their own because they were never that good militarily, and because they have this demographic crisis where they're shrinking rapidly demographically. They can't get, back in the 1980s, they'd get these waves of human soldiers, to like run into the Iraqi guns back in the Iran-Iraq war. But now they can't. They don't have anybody. So right now, what they're doing is they're funding proxies. They're funding the Houthis, Hezbollah, Hamas, all these things that begin with H, and some other militias that don't begin with H, but whose names we don't know. And there's a bunch of like Iranian militias funded throughout the Middle East. They fight by proxy. They're basically these shit disturbers who just mail a bunch of money and send advisors to start conflicts and prosecute conflicts throughout the Middle East. And we've had a whole bunch of basically we're fighting that little Cold War. We're helping the hapless Saudi Arabians fight these little proxy wars by sending our own troops and our own to sort of counter exactly what Iran's doing throughout the Middle East. This is not necessarily the best investment. Houthis, that whether we should intervene really depends on how well we are able to protect global trade, because as long as the Houthis are still there firing those missiles at ships, it doesn't matter how many times we hit the Houthis. As long as ships are still scared to go near, ships are going to go around the Red Sea. I do believe in protecting global trade. I do also think we should note that is not our trade. The United States does not ship things through the Red Sea. We are not nearby.
It's not our trade, but I mean, like Europe, wants us to do something, right? They want us to.
That's right. Yeah. But you know what? Guess who hasn't done anything? Europe.
Yeah,
Europe
but that's, isn't
America,
that
protect our trade. It's not our trade.
Yeah, but isn't that like kind of the deal
Europe's
we have?
trade,
Like,
fine.
we're NATO, we're the leader of the free
China's
world.
trade too.
Yeah.
It's China's trade. So Europe is like, that's how China ships Europe all those cars it's selling. It ships them through the Red Sea. It doesn't ship them across the Trans-Siberian Railroad. It ships them through the Red Sea on a big, cargo ship. And it, that is their trade. They need to step up and join Operation Prosperity Guardian, or even just their own independent efforts. They need to send their own ships. Like China is the one who's going to suffer massively if the Houthis interdict their trade to Europe. Europe will also suffer to some degree, but since Europe now has this giant trade deficit with China, China will suffer the most. China's the one that's going to be hurt by this, and yet China has, allowed and even encouraged the Houthi attacks in order to, increase global chaos and tie the United States down. Withdraw off the United States' resources.
Do you think,
they've hurting their own trade?
From like a security geopolitical question, do we want to give China an excuse to start flexing their naval might, through India, through the Arabian Sea? We want to give them them building that up and doing that. Why? What's the rationale?
We want them doing that. Oh, because that will divert their resources from trying to take over Asia, which would involve a really, really giant, bloody World War III. And, getting them involved in protection of trade, projecting power, sailing their ships over to the, Arabian Sea and Red Sea and Persian Gulf and all those areas. That, first of all, that's the behavior of a responsible power. China's not going to just vanish into the ether. It's going to be an incredibly powerful country for decades and decades to come. And we always want them to be a responsible power, a country that doesn't disturb shit and try to start conflicts throughout the world, and, a country that helps uphold the global order from which they benefit. So why don't they spend some of their own vast resources and massively expanding navy to guard the trade that is theirs? Why is that our job? I'm in favor of us helping and doing it because I think we should be altruistic and help guard global trade and providing public goods. But it's their trade. They should pay some money. And they have this giant fucking navy, this navy that's much bigger than ours now. They have the biggest navy in the world. Go guard your own trade, guys. That's a better use of their resources than attacking Taiwan, attacking Japan, attacking India, attacking people in their home area.
So a couple things. Okay, so firstly, I don't think the United States should do anything altruistically, and we absolutely don't do anything altruistically. So I feel like the defense of global trade isn't necessarily just like an altruistic, we want to help the world, but it's more just it like reinforces why we sit at the top of the world hegemon right now when it comes to managing security or managing trade or other sorts of deals between nations. I feel like the idea of giving all of that influence away over to China, although I guess since you want us to pull out of the Middle East, maybe you think that influence in the Middle East isn't important. I feel like that power vacuum and allowing China to like start to practice military operations at sea, start to flex their navy more. Like you say, they have the largest navy in the world, but like do they have the most powerful navy in the world by any stretch of the imagination? Yeah, I don't know. I guess it depends on what you think the U.S. place should be when it comes to managing world affairs versus do we just kind of like atomize this a little bit more and let everybody kind of take care of their stuff? Because at the end of the day, it seems like more influence for China for free when we already spend all this money on our military navy everywhere, like what else are we doing?
Yeah, but we don't have the capacity. I mean, money is one thing, but Americans are so used to looking at dollars that get spent on pages, that get allocated in Excel, right? We're a nation of Excel spreadsheets. You can look at dollars, but then when you look at actual ships and actual things that get bought, our things cost 10 times as much. And often that's not an exaggeration, actually, what I just said. So in some cases, it's an exaggeration. In many cases, it's not. We do not have the resources to simultaneously deter a Chinese invasion of Taiwan, pacify the Middle East, and fully support Ukraine against Russia. The United States, we had those resources if we were willing to convert large percentages of our economy to a war economy, if we were willing to increase defense spending from its current 3% of GDP to perhaps 6%, 5% even of GDP. That's 2% of GDP. Our GDP is what, $30 trillion, right? So 1% of our GDP is $300 billion. So if we were able to increase our defense budget by $600 billion, maybe we could do all this stuff that you're talking about and overcome some of our problems with, producing munitions and things like that, which I think we could do with the Defense Production Act and other tools. It would take a big push. If we were willing to do a Reagan-style military buildup right now, we could do all the things you're saying. And maybe we should do that. But nobody, Republicans are just dead set against it. And even if Trump doesn't get elected, there's going to be enough Republicans in Congress to block a Reagan-style military buildup. We've exited time of history when Republicans wanted a strong military.
I can understand that. I disagree with that. I don't think we've exited the time of history where Republicans don't want a strong military. I kind of agree, but I think right now, I think in Congress, I think what they are really trying to do is just oppose Biden at every single measure, whatever he could do. Because if Trump came in and he said that we need to fund the military, you know that every single Republican would switch on a dime and would say like, oh, you're absolutely right. We need to go blah, 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 blah. I think for evidence of this, you just look at the massive support for Trump when it came time to bombing Syria, as opposed to when Obama was bombing Syria, or when Trump signed off on moving the embassy to Jerusalem, or when Trump signed off on hiding how much drone striking was going on in Yemen, or when Trump talked about Jesus. I think one of the most like cartoonishly villainous things I've ever heard a U.S. president say in my lifetime, that sounds like what all the liberals used to accuse Bush and Obama of doing, is when Trump was like, we're going to go to Syria, we're going to take their oil fields, we're going to take their oil fields, we're going to run them, and we're going to take all the money from them. And I'm pretty sure Republicans are like, yeah, let's do it, Trump. So I feel like Republicans right now will support whatever Trump wants to do. But I do think what you say, it's really important to understand that, and this really sucks to say, but a lot of our foreign policy at this particular political moment in time is going to be held hostage by figuring out how to maneuver around Republicans in Congress. So for instance, and again, it sucks that these calculations even have to be made, is our inability to deal with issues at the border. Is it worth it to sacrifice that potentially huge election issue domestically to secure funding for foreign policy initiatives like in Ukraine? And right now, it seems like, unless that's changed, I think all of this money is being held together in the same types of like spending bills and stuff. So you're kind of like fucked. I don't know what that's going to look like or how that's going to play out. Yeah.
Look, I understand that's an obstacle, but I guess maybe walk me through this, gang. Maybe I'm just not understanding that how empowering China to take our place basically in guarding this trade will make them weaker or make Taiwan more secure. Because I think that does the opposite. I think it makes Taiwan less secure. Taiwan is watching us to see if the U.S. specifically, to see if we're able to keep our commitments, right? They're watching us in Ukraine. They're watching us in with the Houthis and things like, with the maritime trade and things like that. They're waiting to see if people can trust us, right? If the international community can trust America to keep our word, right? And I don't know if withdrawing from the Middle East, I don't know if like ceding that ground is going to make Taiwan more secure. In fact, I'm worried it might embolden China to say, oh look, we don't think the Americans can handle this kind of thing. So what's stopping us, right? Why am I wrong, I guess, would be the question.
I feel like right now, I don't know if me and Noah actually have like a normative disagreement here, or if we just factually think things will play out differently. I think it's like
I'm more scared of China. That's what we need to argue about. But yes, go
sure. I think there are two futures ahead of us. I see one as being more likely. Noah sees the other as being more likely. I think Noah's argument is essentially that China should be tasked with the defending passage of ships through the Gulf of Aden, through the Red Sea, because it's China's economy as a manufacturing economy that exports a lot of goods and services, or goods especially to Europe. China's the one that's getting hurt the most by this. So it should be, the onus should be on China to take care of this. And I think Noah feels that China probably couldn't adequately do it, or that the additional strain or stress on them would either be prohibitive or would force them to make difficult decisions domestically if they actually had to field their navy, fund their navy, and then, take whatever political hits or geopolitical hits happen as a result of them enforcing these things in that region of the world. Whereas my worry would be China would rise to that challenge. They would do it exceedingly well. And then all of a sudden, all the players in that region, like Iran, who's also supported by Russia, and, Yemen, would look to China and be like, oh, you guys are really good. You are helping us. And then people like Saudi Arabia and the rest of OPEC would be like, okay, well, the United States didn't step up to do this. China, who's already mediated, peace deals in the region between the Emiratis, between the Saudis and the Yemenis, China seems like they want to step up. Maybe we should point towards them, and maybe we should kind of be working more closely with China rather than the United States. And then the question just becomes, what is the cost of losing all of that influence in the OPEC world that we've spent so much time and money and history building up? And is that worth a potential failure of China to enforce trade in that region, I guess, would be the worry.
Okay, so I think that we have to think about alternatives, like what could China do with its power? I don't think that people understand the magnitude of China's power. People don't understand it because it hasn't been used yet. We're in a situation like the Europeans were in like the 1910s, where America had this industrial might that was just incomprehensibly larger than everybody else. But Europeans didn't understand that this could be used for war, that this could be used for military purposes. And they just did not. And they, then World War I came, and we came in at the end of World War I, and we sort of tipped the balance. But even after that, they still didn't quite understand. Only in World War II did they understand. Only when suddenly America just single-handedly outproduced everybody else, just with this massive effort, without even spending that much of our GDP on war production compared to other countries. United States was just like, boom, we built this monster fleet. So in a thing I like to quote about World War II is that at the beginning of the war, we had 6 modern aircraft carriers and Japan had 10. And most of the famous battles you hear about were fought using that small number of aircraft carriers. Then we built a fleet of 141 aircraft carriers. And by the end of the war, we had 100-something aircraft carriers just flooding the waters around Japan. And they were better than the ones that existed at the beginning of the war. And so that was an example of our industrial might. We did not even devote that much of our national resources toward building the aircraft carriers, because at the same time, we were building insanely large fleets of bombers and fighters to annihilate Germany.
Do you think China can reproduce that kind of fleet?
Yes.
Damn.
Yes, they can.
I don't know.
More. Yes.
Well, I feel like
people do not understand the United States' shipbuilding capacity to China's right now. China can produce 200 times the number of ships America can. Yes, many of those are commercial ships that aren't as militarily sophisticated as the top-of-the-line ships, but top-of-the-line ships are good, but they get, eventually just attrited and taken out by some random missile. And, so the point is that 200 times, they can outproduce us by 200 times in terms of ships. And in terms of missiles, you get a similar thing. And artillery, they haven't even started to build artillery yet. But in terms of missiles, they can produce so many more missiles than we can. Their manufacturing capability, China's manufacturing right now in terms of actual gross value added, in terms of the actual price people pay for stuff, is equal to, it is greater than the United States and Europe combined. In 5 years, China built more high-speed rail than exists in the rest of the world, counting Japan, counting Europe, all those countries together, combined. China built, in 5 years, more high-speed rail than exists in the entire rest of the world. And China went from basically no presence in the car industry to being the world's largest exporter of cars in general, of autos, largest auto exporter in 3 years. You cannot imagine the size of the factories, the amount of labor and capital and resources that goes into this stuff. Can we choke off their oil with a blockade? No, we can't. We cannot do that. Number one, because we don't have the ability to interdict. We have the ability to interdict about 20% of the ships that go from the Middle East with a distant blockade, according to estimates I've seen. We can't even interdict all those ships. We don't have the technological capability to do that. Even if we did, China can, in a war situation, China can easily make oil from coal, as Nazi Germany did. It is called the Fischer-Tropsch process. China has enough coal to keep them going for several years while they keep their insane levels of production going and annihilate our military by just overwhelming it. People do not understand the magnitude of China's power because it hasn't used it yet. And you got to look at the numbers. The United States' defense industrial base is so fucking shriveled, people don't even understand this. In 1996, we were able to produce about 1 million artillery shells per month. Now, after this 4-year project by the Defense Department to ramp up our artillery production to support Ukraine, we hope to be able to produce, after a 4-year ramp up, 100,000 shells per month. Are we percent of what we were able to produce in the 90s?
Okay, I'm about to ask the nerdiest fucking question in the universe. Have you ever played a game called EVE Online?
No.
Where are you going with this?
Well, I know a lot about it.
Okay, no, it's fine.
But yes, I know about it.
It's funny because I play that game, unfortunately, too much. But I feel like there's a lot of military stuff in that game that also seems to carry over to real life. And I think one thing that people dramatically underestimate, and I think this has been shown in the Ukraine-Russian conflict, is electronic warfare is unbelievably important. And I think the sophistication of your military can easily make it 50, 100, 500 times better than somebody being able to mass produce trash. Now, I'm not saying that all the Chinese military capabilities or naval capabilities will be bad, but I feel like if I had to, bet on one aircraft carrier in the United States that's supported by a full fleet versus, 50 times more ships, supported by China, I feel like the United States' ability to do recon, to do long distance strikes, to disable through either electronic warfare or long range weapons or other means, enemy offensive and defensive capabilities, the idea that just because you can make a lot of stuff means you can win. I mean, look at the Spanish Armada? Weren't they basically completely and utterly destroyed by a bunch of smaller ships that were just more maneuverable? I think that those lessons still carry through to today, where I don't know if we've seen any evidence of China being able to conduct widespread, sophisticated military operations in a large theater of war. I don't think that's ever been shown. I don't know if they even have the capability to do it. And I feel like I understand the manufacturing scares from another point of view, that like they could out-manufacture like artillery shells and stuff, but I don't know if that's going to be determinative in solving long-range, long-scale conflict that involves the coordination of so many highly sophisticated military forces. But yes, also I don't know if we know, right? Because we haven't seen anything from China, Yeah.
I will tell you why they'll be able to do it, because they will learn. Because in the course of a long war, which they can sustain, and we, with our current capabilities, cannot, in the course of a long war, militaries learn. Humans are smart. They learn how to do things. The United States at the beginning of World War II was not incredibly competent at war. We, in the initial surface engagements with Japan, we lost them all, because Japan had been fighting for a while and we had not, and Japan knew how to fight. That didn't matter. We have overwhelmed them. The United States did not, in World War I, our soldiers got killed at I think a 5-to-1 ratio versus the Germans. We were that incompetent in World War I. People do not understand how incompetent the United States was in World War I. When we took our manufacturing capability and our large population and all these advantages that we had, we started trying to turn them toward war. We didn't even learn to be good over the entire course of our involvement, of our 1 year or something involvement in World War I. And then in World War II, it took us years to gain the competence that we eventually finished the war with. We eventually finished the war knowing how to do everything, being better than everyone else qualitatively as well as quantitatively, because we learned. And people do not understand that Germany actually had better technology than us in many areas. My grandfather, he was a bombardier. One of my grandfathers, the other was an infantryman. But my bombardier grandfather, one time, their plane was grounded for a day, and it was very lucky because almost all the bombers in their entire wing were wiped out by an attack by experimental or sort of new novel Messerschmitt jet fighters. Germany had jet fighters. America didn't have jet fighters till later. We didn't even have jet fighters. Here comes a bunch of German jet fighters out of nowhere and just wipes out this bomber wing. We overwhelmed Germany. There was never any question that they could beat us, even though they had jet fighters. They had ballistic missiles hitting London at the time we were annihilating their empire. They had ballistic missiles in World War II. We didn't have ballistic missiles. We didn't know what the fuck that was. We were technologically behind them in many areas of aerospace. They had jet fighters. We had bigger, heavier bombers, but they had a lot of stuff that we didn't. It didn't matter. It didn't matter at all. We just stomped them because our stuff was not the best, but it was good enough, right? Many people argue back and forth about how good the Sherman tank was, but at the beginning it had this underpowered gun. It was like blah blah blah. We had a lot of them, and we just, we massively overwhelmed them. China's technology is not crap, right? We're not facing like some low tech country, right? They're not coming at us with like bamboo spears or something. They're coming at us with stuff that's a little worse than our stuff that they don't have experience using. And yes, that gives us an advantage. All the things you said are right, directionally correct in the sense that these are advantages that we have, but China will learn. If they fight us for more than a month, they'll learn. If they fight us for more than a year, they'll really learn. And as we've seen in Ukraine, a war that a lot of people think is going to be home by Christmas, is going to be over quick, ends up dragging on, and China has much more ability to sustain it. We sink China's first fleet, they build a new fleet. They sink our fleet, we don't build a new fleet. That's what happens. We can't build a new fleet, they can build a new fleet. They're like, okay, let's respawn. They respawn because of their manufacturing capacity. If you play, video games, their army reappears because they can.
Video game references. Are we going to do some Zerg dog?
Yeah, right.
Zerg tactics.
It doesn't matter whether you imagine that China's Zerg, Protoss, or Terran. The fact is that they have the like resources, and that we do not. We have the depleted fucking Vespine geysers in the little mineral field with only one little crystal left.
Don't you think if we do get into a shooting war with China, that we won't upgrade and expand our capacity at a record rate? Like those obstacles that we have now that prevent us from really upping the military-industrial complex back to its former glory. You don't think that we would turn on a fucking dime, right, to do that? I absolutely believe. You don't think so?
We will turn. We will turn. You're right. It's a good question. It's an important point. We will turn, but we will not turn on a dime, because we have created an entire system of regulations and rules and institutional incentives and blah, 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 enforced by every court in the country, enforced by our court system to stop us from doing exactly that. Since World War II, we created a layered defense in depth against building anything in this country. And we can get rid of it, and we will get rid of it. And a shooting war will provide us with incentive to get rid of it should we choose to rise to the challenge. But there's no guarantee we rise to the challenge. You can easily imagine a shooting war with China where the Republicans are all like, Biden got us in, Democrats got us into this. We have no business being there. Who cares about those Asians? And blah, 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 and blocking all stuff. Because that's what they're doing with every other conflict. So, of course, they're going to do that. And then every fucking like NIMBY out in the entire country is like, well, you're not building a defense plant next to my nice view. And then we have to spend 2 years wrangling with them. And then all the like progressives who are part of the Democratic Party, who are like, like the Roosevelt Institute, who actually wants to do industrial policy in order to get good manufacturing jobs for Americans. But they also are funded by a bunch of lawyers, and they love lawyers. And they're like, well, actually, no, we've got to build all these munitions in an environmentally responsible way that maintains access for stakeholders and has, like 85% union labor on every project, even where they're in right-to-work states where there are no union laborers, and blah, 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 blah. And it will take us years to overcome that giant thicket of anti-development stuff that we have built up, and people are not even, people do not understand. We cannot build houses currently. We cannot build trains currently. We are having a hell of a time building chip factories currently. We are having, we're spending, we're having a difficult time. Even our industrial policy that we're doing right now, which is an expansion of, you compare our expansion to China's expansion that they're doing in terms of building ships and cars and stuff. We're building a lot of the same things. We're building battery factories for electric cars. We're building chip factories, blah, blah, blah. If you compare what we're building, we're struggling. China's just zooming because they have an entire system dedicated to building things tomorrow. We had that system in World War II. We will have to rebuild that system. And at the end of the day, it will take us years to do that. And those years of fighting, are we prepared to sustain a losing war through, with Republicans in some power, holding some power? Are we prepared to have the will to spend 2 years getting our ass kicked while we figure out how to get rid of all the NIMBY bullshit that we've built up since the 1970s? I think maybe we will, but maybe we won't. And it's such an insanely large challenge that you guys are envisioning, such a transformative, huge challenge that to like not start thinking about this now is criminal insanity. We've got to start thinking about this now, or China will do to us what we did to the Axis in World War II, and then we'll be done. Anyway, I'm scared.
Go ahead.
I don't
want to give up.
I don't believe any of that. Listen,
I want to take the challenge seriously.
I think there's a difference. I think that you had the opportunity to learn in earlier like wartime theaters. I don't know if China's gonna have the opportunity to learn now. I'm pretty sure that like back then it might have been that like, oh my God, this one guy with a rifle or a certain kind of tank is obliterating us on the battlefield. I think today it's gonna be like, wow, I think America has really good tech, and then you're destroyed from a missile that came from a plane that you couldn't even see on radar like 30 miles away, and you're already dead, and you have no idea what happened. And that plane is already re-landed on an aircraft carrier that is 100 times more sophisticated than anything you can even conceive of building, because the only thing you can do is manufacture huge quantities of shit, and you're only doing it because you're relying on so much fucking trade deficit with like Europe and other countries. I don't see China having like this unbeatable, this navy that I don't even know if they can venture into blue water yet. I don't know if this navy is going to be the thing that's going to destroy the U.S. in any kind of like long-term drawn-out war. I'm writing a lot on like feels and bias here, because I've always heard this thread of like the looming China, and then you also hear these things of like, well, it's a dictatorship, like, Xi can do all these things and he can just order it and it'll happen. And it's like, okay, well, them taking over all of Africa with the crazy loan programs didn't seem to work as effectively as I thought it would. Them doing like this Belt Road and taking over all of Asia doesn't seem to work as well as we thought it would. Them being able to conquer any economic problem and not have these huge demographic issues that they're running into now, it seems like they weren't able to deal with that as well as we thought they could. I feel like they're more like Russia in terms of we've got a lot of stuff, we're going to blow you up, than like a World War II USA who has an untouched country, potentially thriving economy, trade still accessible with people that want to do it. Whereas China would lose, I would imagine, a ton of trade partners if they were engaged in conflict like this. But at the end of the day, I'm just like, I'm totally shooting into thin air because I don't actually know at the end of the day what would happen. But I'm curious actually. Let's say that all of this, Noah, that everything that you're saying is true. I feel like this was kind of my argument earlier for saying this is why I exactly don't think they should be defending like the Strait of Aden or defending any trade through the Suez Canal, because why would you want them to gain that practice and that early military experience so easily and cheaply, just defending people from pirates in Yemen? Wouldn't we want to deprive them of that military experience?
That is a fair question. Yeah. So that is one place where getting China to take a more active role could hurt us, because it could get them some of the experience that would allow them to win at the outset of a war instead of having to learn over the course of years to beat us in a war. So that's actually good.
I also feel like one of the things too is,
but Europe at least should guard that strait because that's their trade.
Sure. Europe, to be fair, I think like the UK and I think France have sent like a couple boats. They're there. Okay, they're there in spirit at least.
Yeah, a couple boats. These guys are such free riders. These motherfuckers.
I also think that there's something to be said for I might be very recentist in my thinking here, and that I'm exceptional because we're in 2024 and it's not like any other year ever. But I feel like technological sophistication today, I feel like is a lot different than it used to be back in World War II times as well. Where before you might have a guy, like Einstein working on a paper, and he's got this awesome theory of relativity, and this one guy in science can like flip everybody on their head, and these people in labs are making these contributions to things, and this guy is like, fuck, like maybe we should change our plans like this. I feel like in 100 years ago, or even like 80 years ago, maybe technology could work this way. Whereas today, it's like you need like 100 people grinding in labs, doing insanely expensive tests in equipment that's only available to some people in the world, like sharing their results with other like high-level people. The technological advances made today are so much harder to do that I would wonder if it's possible that you could make all these, leaps and jumps in terms of technological savviness in China as quickly as the United States could in terms of catching up in World War II. I'd be curious if that would be possible, or if there's a bigger technological hurdle today that can't just be overcome with need, I
don't know, but what we've seen in Ukraine is not that. So what we've seen in Ukraine is that the Ukrainians using Western technology had a substantial technological edge over the Russians for a while. At first, the Russians had a slight technological edge over Ukraine because they had done a little bit more research, and it wasn't really that big a difference. It was mostly old Soviet shit that they were using in the first year of the conflict. Then we gave Ukrainians HIMARS, we gave them this and that. And the Ukrainians had a technological edge, and it did help, but it wasn't like incredibly decisive. They've sunk 20% of Russians' Black Sea fleet. With no navy of their own, they've sunk quite a bit of Russia's fleet. So it does help. Like there's a lot of it does do something, right? The idea, though, that technology has technological asymmetry has changed to the point where, it's this overwhelming thing that can compensate for just absolutely overwhelming differences in productive power.
I think it can. Absolutely.
I hope you're right, but we need to plan for you being wrong.
Sure, I agree with that. But like, even when we look at like Ukraine is like the little dude that wants to go and fight against Russia. He seems like this big bad indomitable force. But like, we're like drip feeding Ukraine technology, tanks and planes on like the smallest syringe possible. Like, if we were to unleash like a full brunt of like, listen, here's a fuck ton of planes, here's a fuck ton of missiles, here's a fuck ton of tanks, go crazy. The reason why we don't do this isn't because we think that Ukraine can't use them. It's because we think they'll be too effective, start invading Russia, and now we've got World War III. So I feel like if anything, Ukraine's defense against Russia, the only reason why we're drip feeding them weapons so much is because we don't want them to do too well, and then like, fuck, now we're like in a huge, international land-based conflict, which I think people don't want to do. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like for Ukraine, I think that their stuff, it's not that we've just like opened our armory to them. They've worked really well with a pretty limited set of assets we provided. And I feel like those limited set of assets have been really helpful in terms of them.
Look at small drones. Look at small drones that drop grenades on infantry, blow themselves up on FPV drones that blow up vehicles. Look at that. That is not a technology in which the United States was leading at the beginning of the war, and it is not a technology where Ukraine's edge has been determined by United States aid.
Who are they getting their drones from? Do you think they're manufacturing all of those?
Making their own. They're making their own.
With all their own technology and everything?
Making their own and buying them from China. They're making their own and buying them from China, yes. Yes, Ukraine
Possible, yeah.
invented these like little cardboard drones that were able to like fly 1,000 miles into Russia and bomb some refinery or plane. Ukraine invented that. Ukraine is arguably better in small, cheap drone technology than the United States is now. I think they're probably better. They're building their own stuff. They're buying from China. Most of the, like the DJI drones just absolutely rule the skies. If you look at those videos, every time I post one of those videos, people are like, why did you post a snuff film? It's because so you could see what the battlefield looks like now, so that you could feel the fear of understanding why America needs to invest in the shit. And so all those drones come from China that are dropping grenades on soldiers, and soldiers are like, little drone, some little toy just killed me in those videos that people get mad when I post. Those drones are from China. The United States does not make those drones. We do not make. Our military doesn't. Raytheon doesn't. No one makes that shit, and yet they are incredibly decisive on the battlefield. The long range drones that just just randomly bomb someplace within Russia, those are made in Iran. Those are Ukraine's making their own, and their own variants, which are probably better. But Iran is making those in large numbers for Russia, and now Iran has helped Russia make their own. Those are not made in the United States. So when we've seen the drone war in Ukraine, we've seen this technological conflict. It is not dominated by United States just comes in with some awesome, gee whiz thing that can blow everyone else's thing away. It is not that. It is a case of technological adaptation and rapid catch up, where whatever the Ukrainians come out with, the Russians learn how to do, and whatever the Russians come out with, the Ukrainians learn how to do. And I'm not saying every single area of technological competition in a US-China war will be just like that, but there will be lots of areas like that where China learns. Chinese people are as smart as we are. They can learn as well as we can. They learn, and the Russians learn, and the Ukrainians learn. These people all learn. People learn to fight wars. The United States learned in World War II. And just saying, what do we have on paper at the very beginning of day one of the war is just a fancy way of saying this war will be over by Christmas, and it won't. Anyway.
Sure, I guess, yeah. And then you can have the final word on my response. I understand what you're saying. I'm sure that Ukraine has made good investments into maybe the small drone tech, but I feel like the reason why the United States would be lacking there is because I don't know if we would ever use tech like this in the battlefield. In Russia, Ukraine, they might have the small drones to fly over and drop the grenade, and the Russian soldiers might not like that. But I feel like if they were fighting the United States, we would just have control of the skies, and we would just bomb the fuck out of anything from airplanes, miles and miles and miles away that they would never even see. We wouldn't be wasting time on grenades from small drones. We would be firing missiles, air-to-surface missiles that would destroy an entire, troop position, rather than investing so much in small drones. Maybe that would be different. Maybe not. I'm not sure. I don't know. We've seen
Jordan the other day.
What?
Soldiers in Jordan. Just several American soldiers died in Jordan the other day. 3 American soldiers died and several wounded. Mm-hmm. What did it?
Probably drone attacks.
Yes, a drone attack from a random militia with an Iranian drone that uses the motor from a lawnmower.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, like I said, in small-scale conflict, yeah, for sure, but we're not at official war with Iran or Syria. If we were, I don't know how relevant. I don't think small drones would have saved Saddam Hussein in the first or second war in Iraq. No amount of small drones, because
Russia has some of the best electronic warfare in the world that stopped small drones getting through, and small drones still get through in decent numbers from Ukraine to attack Russian positions and destroy their stuff. Okay. And you can invest in defense, but it's not like this thing where you have this magical supreme technology that can compensate for this insane production asymmetry. We don't have a magic button we can press to down all the fleets of Chinese drones from the sky at a very cheap price point. We're trying to invent that now with laser weapons, right? Mm-hmm. We're trying to create that thing, but it's not clear if it can be created, and it's not clear, because China at the same time will be racing to and is racing to probably figure out ways around that. Certainly, the Russians are racing to figure out ways around Ukraine's drone defenses, and the point is that there's if you look at the history of any war, it's not just what the countries have at the beginning that matters. It's what the countries build during the course of the conflict. That happens every damn time. It will matter what we build during the course of the conflict. It will matter what the Russians build during the course of the conflict. It will matter what the Chinese build during the course of the conflict. That's what ultimately determines it. It's staying power and adaptability that win wars. It is not like your initial stockpile. Technology has not changed to the point where nobody learns things and nobody develops new things. That's not technology has not changed that much. The only thing that we could do, we could nuke China. We could unleash hell and start, a global apocalypse on day one. And then maybe after that, they couldn't bounce back. Although, honestly, they couldn't bounce back. Even after that, it would not take them out and destroy them. Even nuclear bombs would not do that. So,
what?
Yeah.
Really?
That's a thing no one wants to hear, but it's true.
Yeah. What do we mean by nuclear bombs would destroy them?
Well, we have 1,500 nuclear weapons, and if every nuclear weapon killed, 100,000 people, we've put a dent in China's population. We'll put a dent in their production structure. Their production structures are incredibly widely distributed. If you look at the radius of nuclear bomb, of course, we're going to give a fuck ton of people cancer, but we won't. A full nuclear strike by the United States on China would not take out it wouldn't destroy Chinese civilization. It wouldn't destroy the human race. It wouldn't cause, even the nuclear winter estimates are it would cancel out the effects of global warming so far. But,
sure. I mean, I don't think for nuclear strikes, I don't think the goal is to eradicate a population or to go for population complete destruction.
We could have done that with our Cold War stockpile. We had 30,000 nukes.
Sure. But I mean, the goal is probably to just I imagine if you can destroy 100 to even just 100 major manufacturing areas, you've probably crippled by what, 20, 30, 40% the enemy's production. I feel like
you talked about this production.
Cripple their production by 20, 30%. That's not crippling.
A few nukes, well, not a few, but enough nukes to take down their production levels to lower than we are now. I just don't. I don't believe you. I think that takes them out of the game. I don't know. I may be wrong.
But do you want to find out?
No, well, obviously not, right? Obviously not. But I don't know if we would need to go that far, right? I understand that China's been doing saber rattling when it comes to Taiwan, and they've been doing that for a while, and they have actual plans to invade Taiwan, to strike U.S. military bases before they invade Taiwan, to keep us out of the area. Their goal is to have a mission accomplished before we could actually get there and stop it. I get that. I just don't know, right, if they'd be able to hold us off for enough time for us to just reverse that. And I don't know if they want to be in a protracted war with us. I just don't think they do.
Well, hopefully we never have to find out.
Yeah, I know. Did we want to be in a protracted war in World War II?
Of course not.
American was incredibly reluctant to get in that war. Only Pearl Harbor motivated Americans to get in that war, and FDR lost vote share each election during that war.
A couple super chats from Artemis Fowl to say 1 B-2 Spirit and a 2,000-pound payload can empty 3 Gorges Dam. It is very unstable, and 150 million Chinese citizens will be lost downstream from just that one rupture. I don't know if that's true or not, but fair enough.
We can blow up the 3 Gorges Dam. It's not going to kill 150 million people. I'd kill a million.
A lot. Let's kind of take it back just a minute, because I want to talk about some of the when it comes to the obstruction that's happening right now in Congress and things like that. I want to take it from Congress to more of a social pressure. Do you think that the way that the media and the even social influencers are covering the current conflicts is making us more or less secure globally? What do you think?
Globally?
Or is it
I'll go Destiny.
Geopolitically, right? On a geopolitical stage. For example,
I would say that as a principle, any time your multiple personalities are fighting yourself, you're less able to fight things internationally. So the more divided you are domestically, always necessarily, the more unable to mount a consistent foreign affairs program. Full stop. You can see this in terms of look at our different treatment of Iran. You had Bush put them on the axis of evil. You had Obama, sign a nuclear deal with them, and then you had Trump renege on that deal. Look at Cuba. We have the indefinite embargo, blockade, whatever you want to call it, however you want to say it plays out. You had Obama, thawing that relationship and I think approving flights back to Cuba. I think Trump canceled those again, or at least his administration, I think, took those back, that you can no longer fly to Cuba now as a civilian or commercial plane. Look at the position towards Israel. You had Trump, who basically would have supported Israel doing anything. When the embassy was moved, was that the same time the Golan Heights were annexed as well? Was it with the moving of that embassy, or was that annexation earlier? No, that was 1991. That was way earlier. Sorry, when they formally annexed it. Yeah, and then compare now to Biden, who's like trying to hold the reins back a little bit more on Israel. I don't know if Trump would be doing it. Or maybe it was just a recognition of such. Yeah, I think when we're divided amongst ourselves internally, it's very hard to have a consistent international foreign policy presence. Yeah.
Has Biden, on that note, and I'm just curious, do you think that Biden has made us more secure globally, or has he made us less secure globally? On the whole, on the average, what do you think?
For me, I would say more. Like I said in my whole spiel initially, I think all of the foreign policy events and affairs that we're involved in now, I think we have much better reasons to be involved in. And I think reducing the involvement in that Saudi-led coalition in Yemen, and I think pulling out of Afghanistan, being done with Iraq, I think that the missions that we're involved in now, it's all like kind of one consistent enemy, like this Iran, Russia, China thing. I think it's a better direction than what we've been in for the past 20 years.
I agree with that.
Fair enough. To you, Noah, right? We talk a little bit about social media influence on the economy, the Vibe session, right? We know what that is, how a lot of social media influence... You're looking at me like you don't know what that is.
Social media influence vibes, yeah? No?
Yeah. Do you think that plays out in foreign policy as well, right? Do you think that their social media influence and things can make us statistically significantly less secure or not, right? What do you think?
Yeah.
How? Can you elaborate, please? I'm trying to get some discussion.
So, a typical close election to Trump, that's ballgame.
How so?
I think perception is really important, right? And if social media changes your perception of things, it changes people's actual support for things. So, yeah.
Yeah, like you don't have to persuade that many people to tip a close election to someone who actively wants to roll over for the Axis powers.
Damn. Do you think that Hassan is a national security threat because of his takes?
I mean,
well, if you're talking about tipping it to the Axis powers, right? You only need a small influencer, right? Hassan isn't small.
Yeah, but
national security threat. Can we get you on record?
I don't know if he himself is big enough to do anything to tip an election. I memean, obviously, like, he's a bad guy with a lot of bad takes, right? He's like his whole thing is just casting that America is terrible. He is like he's an Axis supporter. He is a supporter of the Axis powers, and he is working for the destruction of America, his own country. That is bad. I think that's is he important enough by himself? I mean, channel's like lost a lot of its popularity, right? Like fewer people are watching him. I don't know. Actually, you guys are much more capable of giving an answer to that than me, because I don't know how powerful Twitch streamers are. I don't know how much influence they have. I don't know how much audience they really have. So maybe no one's paying attention to what we're saying right now. I don't know. And also, like, maybe all the people he's talking to are just a bunch of like leftist kids who would have believed all the same things anyway. Like, I think that's true with Chapo Trap House. I think that Chapo Trap House didn't change anyone's mind. They just provided entertainment that was consistent with people's pre-existing beliefs by saying all the stuff they said. And I think that that's then again, you see research papers that show that like there's a Fox News effect where when people watch Fox News as their main news source for like a long time, they drift in the direction of the Republican Party. It's not a huge effect, but it's like enough to potentially tip elections. So Fox News has had a real effect. The question is the sort of like leftist anti-American podcast ecosystem robust enough to do something on the level of Fox News? I think there's a chance it is.
Oh my God. No, did you see the that YouGov page where you can track how people feel like the economy is going and then base it on party affiliation?
Yeah.
It's the instantaneous switch back and forth depending on who's president versus what your vibes feel like for how the economy is going. It was there for the Democrats. For the Republicans, though, oh my God, it was insane. Like, as soon as Trump's in office, the economy's going great, everything's fine, blah 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 blah. And then as soon as Biden takes in office, it's like everything is fucked, everything's horrible. People's sentiments on the economy and everything, I think, very closely match the news they consume. Sometimes even more so than the daily prices and everything, or whatever they think they see. All the prices I pay at the pump and blah 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 blah. Like, I can't tell you how many. No offense, not to be mean or classes or whatever. I can't tell you how many like 30,000 a year, 35,000 a year, like Trump supporters are talking about how like the Trump tax cuts like changed my life. But then in the next breath, we'll say things like, I don't think the Biden child tax credits like matter at all. That's just like stupid blah blah. It's like, how can you have both of these opinions? Like, yeah, I don't know. I think it's wild, but.
Yeah, one of the reasons I'm asking is because I see a lot of studies recently, right? Like, that show at least the younger generation has much different foreign policy opinions, especially on the Israel-Palestine conflict, right? How do we deal with that, right? What are we going to do about that long term, right? Do we just kind of have to let it ride? Is there a way we can change their minds? Do they just have to grow out of it? What are our thoughts here?
For social media stuff?
Yeah, well, for just the youth in general, right?
I think young people are always. I've said this for a long time. Like, young people today are insanely radicalized and insanely opinionated and insanely stupid, and that is every young person ever throughout all of human history. We just see it a little bit more now because of social media. Like, people think today that young people are exceptionally insane, but I mean, like, young people have always been insane. You're young. I mean, like, it's not even like a slight. Like, you should be crazy when you're 18, 19, 20. Like, if you're like a super reasonable 20-year-old dude, what the fuck is wrong with you? You should be reading Ayn Rand or being like a Marxist-Leninist or protesting against whatever the fuck you just saw today, or heard about at Starbucks. Like, that's what kids do. They should be. The only mistake that social media has made is not requiring social security numbers to confirm the age of every motherfucker on the platform, so you can auto-ignore everybody below the age of whatever my age is. So right now it would be 35. And then the second mistake is people overemphasize the importance, not to sound mean, this sounds really mean, I don't mean to sound that way. And if I was young and I heard somebody say this, I would also hate them. So, I accept your ire. People just think that young people's opinions aren't too important. They got too much power to cancel people on Twitter. They think that their opinions matter because they, get 100,000 retweets on a whatever. But the reality is, at the end of the day, they don't vote, so politicians don't do anything about what they want. They continue to complain about things and wonder why it doesn't change, and then they show up at the polls in the lowest of any demographic ever. And then eventually they grow up a little bit, and you're like, you know what? Actually, now that I have a kid, or now that I live in a city and I have to walk to work, having homeless people screaming at me and not knowing if they're going to like walk away or try to kill me actually does kind of matter to me a little bit more. Or now that I'm 26 and my parents' health insurance kicked off for me, and now that I'm like working a job, you know what? Things like taxes actually kind of do make me feel a certain type of way. So, I mean, yeah, I think the mistake is on both sides. The mistake is on people looking at kids and being like, oh, they're radicalized. Yeah, you remember Vietnam, or all children ever are radicalized. And then the mistake on the other side is like, we need to do something to appeal to these voters at 20 years old. It's like, well, they don't vote and they'll grow up. Who cares? That's my take on it.
Thoughts? No, pretty much agree. Hit the agree button.
Here I defer to you guys. Like, I'm talking to mostly, like, most of my audience is older people. It's people with jobs. People who like want to read about some economic stuff. There's a few young people who read my stuff, absolutely. But also, you guys get much more direct feedback than I get. I see people on Twitter, but Twitter is just like a den of psychopaths and like bots and foreign people and pseudonymous shit disturbers. And you guys see direct feedback on your shows a lot, and so I think you guys have more of an intuitive sense of this than me.
I'm much too new at the game, much too small to see. Like, most of the comments on my stuff are just like, "Oh, you suck, go KYS" and shit like that. But
yeah, right.
I do have a couple super chats actually. Speaking of direct involvement, Parallax for $5 says the Huang He is the priority. They're already dealing with a freshwater crisis. It's an easy win, in referring to China. And from Pondering Politics for $20, great point from Noah. Who thinks we'd politically unite as a country in the event of a direct war/crisis with China or Russia if a Democrat is president versus a Republican?
As much as I hate to say it, I think enemies actually unite people pretty well. I think if we had a common foreign enemy, I think the American public would unite again. I would hope, but I don't know. I would hope.
I don't know either. I guess.
Maybe. What do we see? Can I interject there?
Oh, by all means.
Um, we've had 2 tests of this recently. They're
Don't say
not
COVID.
full tests. COVID and Russia, Ukraine. Both initially united us in this big. Oh, we've had 3 tests. I'm sorry, 9/11. All of these initially united us very strongly. If you look at polling support, it was incredibly bipartisan in support of Ukraine. You've had Republican governors, enacting social distancing mechanisms in the early days of like March 2020, and you had it's different because it's a disease. It's not really a war, right? But let's say 9/11, you had this massive outpouring of support for the Bush administration and for strikes in Afghanistan, retaliation and getting the Al Qaeda guys. You saw over time that consensus break down, and I that doesn't mean I'm blaming everybody, both sides, blah blah blah. Obviously the Iraq War was a gigantic blunder that Bush never should have done, that killed a lot of the consensus we had. But you saw support for, basically you saw bipartisanship erode over time in these cases. Republicans started out very strongly anti-Russia, very strongly supportive of Ukraine, and then over time you saw from the MAGA right, which were getting they were getting their talking points from the Kremlin through various sources, but someone had to believe that shit and disseminate it on our side, just mind control them. You saw partisanship erode support for Ukraine. You still see many Republicans support Ukraine. However, there's a critical mass of MAGA Republicans who've decided that Ukraine is evil and they've bought every line the Kremlin throws at them, that are blocking aid right now, where aid to Ukraine is actually dried up now. And so you saw it become partisanized over time, even despite this initial surge of bipartisan agreement. And I think in a war with China, there would be this so China might open a war by destroying our bases on at Okinawa and the Philippines, right? Because those bases could spoil an attack on Taiwan because they're very close to Taiwan. They open they Pearl Harbor us, they killed some thousands of American service people and blah, blah. Whoever's president, a Democrat is president, a Republican is president, doesn't matter. We fight China. 2 years later, 2 years into that fight, what does our partisan split look like in terms of the people who are like, give up, why are we there anyway? Isn't this just another Iraq times 10? Versus the people who are like, we got to fight, we got to destroy them. There's going to be there's going to be a massive surge in bots saying, oh, you have a Taiwanese flag in your bio, you Nazi. There's going to be all that shit. There's going to be Tucker Carlson with this shitty little Twitter show. Elon Musk, they're going to convince him that China's good and Taiwan's evil and Taiwan's a bunch of Nazis, and he's going to be out there stumping for, we need peace, we need to just give them Taiwan. It was always part of China anyway, will say Elon Musk. Please save my factories in China. And they'll all the usual suspects will do their work, right? Fox News will equivocate because it's its viewer base will be balanced between the two. This is if a Democrat's president. If a Republican's president, right, then we're going to lose some battles to China. We are. In no war have we won every battle, even the Mexican War. We never win every battle, and every loss that we take, we're going to see people question whether this is a war we should be in. The leftist people, the progressive faction, the Squad, Cory Bush, and all these people will be like, why are we fighting China? Why is this our enemy? There will be a massive campaign to delegitimize American opposition to China as white supremacist. We saw that before. In the early days of COVID, people friends I knew told me that to raise the alarm about COVID online, two friends told me that to raise the alarm about COVID online was bad because it would lead to attacks against Asian people in America. So I shouldn't raise the alarm about COVID. Stuff like that will come out. I don't think Democrats are as bad as Republicans nearly, but I think that if a Republican is president prosecuting the China, war against China, partisanship will eventually intrude in some sense. I think that more importantly, a Republican, if the Republican president in question is Trump, we're not likely to defend Taiwan. We're highly likely to abandon Taiwan and just roll over for them because Trump has given major indications that he would do that.
I feel like for conflict, I think it matters if there's an external threat to us versus like a conflict between two other people. So like China invading Taiwan might be a hard sell to the American people for a wide variety of reasons. China attacking us, I think, has literal Nazis and literal tankies like volunteering for the military to fight. I think that when we get attacked by an external force, I think we want to do something about it. But when other people are fighting, the argument becomes much more, I don't know what, ephemeral or ethereal. Like it's hard to see like, well, what is our interest? And I think part of this actually has to do with lack of honesty when it comes to American foreign policy, because we kind of do this like, oh, we want to defend freedom around the world. And so we do a really bad job at selling our intervention internationally to our own population because we don't know what the fuck we're actually doing. I guess it's for freedom, I guess. I don't know. Isn't Ukraine supposed to be a corrupt country, or is it really freedom when Israel is, killing the poor Palestinian people, or is it really freedom when we're bombing Yemen? Like it's hard when we lie about our foreign policy objectives, I think, to our own population. But yeah, that's why I would say like 9/11 was a good uniter for us because it was us getting attacked by a foreign enemy. Ukraine, Russia is a bit harder because it's two foreign powers against each other. And then Israel, Palestine is harder because it's two foreign powers. And then China might be a foreign thing. I think there's a reason why. I think it's very instructive that when we were pulling out of Afghanistan, when we lost American troops, it was to ISIS. And the Taliban were doing everything they could to make sure that was not us. We are not attacking your shit. We promise we will not do anything. Because I think the Taliban wanted us to leave and they weren't about to start blowing our shit up because they don't want another fucking 10,000 troops there because they know the United States will be there if they start killing our troops or some shit. So that's my feeling on it. But who knows today also. We're in like the mega populist brain rot.
Yeah.
Like, I say that and
I hope you're right.
Yeah, theoretically it could be that
right.
Tomorrow China attacks the United States and Trump comes on stage like China's doing this because we're bad at trade and we suck at negotiating. We need to disband NATO and just do our own thing. And if Trump said that, 95% of MAGA people would follow him, So I don't know. Yeah.
Well, let's I guess let's also talk about the TikTok problem, right? Since we're talking about China, right? The TikTok problem. How serious do you think that is? Do you think it's something that they're just really just overblowing? Is it something that we're crying wolf here, or is it an actual serious threat to our national security? What do you think, Noah?
I think it is a big major threat to our national security.
And what do we do about it, I guess, is what
we force ByteDance to sell TikTok to a non-Chinese subsidiary, preferably to an American subsidiary, or to an American company. We use the power of CFIUS, to force a sale and say, okay, if you don't force a sale, this is getting banned. They will sell. And then China's influence over what gets boosted on TikTok and what gets shown to people will vanish. And that is what we do. We could do it tomorrow. We can do it. We just haven't done it yet. We need to do it immediately. It is a thing we can do. Just force them to sell it. Just do that. And because China's government, the CCP, is calling up the ByteDance people and telling them what to boost on TikTok. We have the evidence. It's not abnormal. We have, direct verified reports of like a couple cases of this. But then if you look at the statistics of what topics trend on Instagram versus TikTok, when you see political topics that are not related to China, when you see political topics that are not related to China is very similar between Instagram and TikTok. And then suddenly for Uyghurs or Tiananmen Square, anything like that, it just absolutely falls off a cliff for TikTok and stays, relative to Instagram.
Yeah. So, do you agree with this? Do we sell?
I don't have, some people have very strong opinions on TikTok. I don't have the strongest opinion on TikTok, but I also don't have a good grasp of the facts. Like if what Noah's saying, if it was the case that you can very clearly demonstrate that there is some tinkering going on to drive anti-American sentiment, and that's not just the result of people that use the platform or how people engage with it, I would say that's definitely a problem and maybe a sale should be forced or something. I do think that, and this is a lot more comprehensive, and everything I'm saying doesn't matter because nobody is going to agree on this anyway, but I think that something we need to focus on a lot more as Americans is we need to do a much better job at inoculating our population against fucking stupid foreign propaganda. And I noticed that I think that sometimes we take a lot of liberalism for granted, that like, oh, private property rights are important, and ability to choose your own religion is important, and maybe women being allowed to vote and work jobs is important. We kind of just take that for granted, and at some point we've decided that this is such part of the common lexicon that not only are we not going to even defend these ideas anymore, if you even question them or attack them, we're banning you from every social media platform. And I think that social media companies started to realize after 2001 that this wasn't an effective means of deterring people from believing crazy fucking things instead of just driving them to other platforms. I think that's why YouTube rolled back their censorship policies and now they just put notes. I think it's why Twitter rolled back. Well, they did that because Elon Musk is crazy. But like the community note system on Twitter is better than it was before, which is where you just get banned. I think that we need to do a much better job at educating people on like, hey, I know that you might not like the U.S. State Department all the time, but man, you sure are fucking retarded if you don't believe the U.S. State Department and then you start retweeting things from Russia Today. That makes you really stupid, and you need to understand why that's really stupid. So I think that maybe forcing the sale of TikTok would be good, but I think that we need to do a much better job at educating people about why liberalism is good, democracies are good, our country is good, and not have a whole bunch of young people discovering for the first time, oh my God, Osama bin Laden's letter to America, this is actually so crazy and awesome, and he identifies all our problems. Oh my God, it's like so fucking amazing. Like, bro, come on, really? You don't learn anything about this in school or know why any of the things he's saying are fucking crazy? Or, I don't know. But we need to do a better job at educating people. But that's like such a broad, meaningless statement that I don't know.
Yeah, the follow-up question would be like, right? Like, what vectors would we use? Are we talking public education system here? Are we talking like a full court press propaganda-wise by the government? Like, what are we looking at, right?
All the weird administration shit that goes on in colleges right now, it needs to come to a grinding, screeching halt. I don't even hold faculty responsible. I feel like it's mainly administrators. The really weird, crazy, ultra woke, I feel like college administrators are like the actual people that MAGA Republicans think that all the Democrats are. The administrators are actually this. I've just read too many stories at this point of like a black educator that's been doing race-based education for like 40 years, like talking about racially sensitive issues, getting like ousted by a younger black student who thinks that now he's racist, or people in these departments that are getting outed for like showing there was that thing to be fair, this was France, but what was that one teacher that showed a picture of Muhammad and got beheaded, and there were people like, well, maybe you shouldn't do that, maybe that's insensitive, or all the weird, like, sometimes I feel like the DEI stuff might be going too far. The college stuff needs to change. The what?
Wait, Noah, do you think the DEI stuff is going too far? Can you elaborate?
Of course. I mean, if you take the name of DEI at face value, diversity, equity, inclusion, like, okay, that sounds good. And it's certainly very easily possible for me to imagine programs that would be very good at these things, promoting these things. And in fact, there probably are examples across America of policies that are very good at promoting these things. However, when we see what has been done in actuality, you see that a lot of DEI is, for example, corporations requiring everyone to take these training seminars where they hire like the goofiest consultants in the world, Tima Oken and Robin DiAngelo, to tell you that like punctuality is white culture,
and hard
work is white culture, and now these things, and it's just completely stupid, because what happens is the company is covering its legal basis against potential discrimination lawsuit, and it is hiring whatever consultants have offered their services, not whatever consultants would actually get the job done. So it is hiring the most, and it's not teaching people how to get along with a diverse set of coworkers. It's not teaching people how to like be sensitive at work. It is teaching people, like, it is not even teaching people anything. It's just throwing this stupid crap in front of people for legal liability purposes, and that's like I don't know if going too far. I don't know if there's a direction in the proper amount of like stupid crap that we want to like force people to watch at companies. But I think that like any of that is stupid. It's dumb, and it really, it detracts from the ultimate goal of having a civilization where people of all races and faiths and etc. backgrounds can live together and understand each other and cooperate and feel comfortable around each other, I think is the word inclusion. And I think that, and diversity, right? It detracts from that to reduce it to these ridiculous sort of cartoons, written by these goofballs that we just hire because they're the only ones available who are doing this kind of stuff. The idea of policies to help people get along with a diverse set of coworkers is a good idea on its face, but the way it has been implemented has been just so stupid in many areas that I think it's actually damaging the cause.
100% agree. Yeah. It's just like some of it is like there are some incredibly positive ways to do affirmative action related stuff, like recruiting in predominantly black high schools or offering scholarships to disadvantaged communities that are can even be racially targeted. I don't know where the Supreme Court stands on that, but like I think there are ways to do affirmative action that's incredibly positive. But some of the goofy shit, like, oh God, I hate that I even have to say this, but like if I hear somebody talking about any topic and they use the term like anti-racism or anything having to do with colonial anything or oppressor or whatever, I already tune out. I feel like I'm not gonna hear anything of value from a person talking about this. And the weird like
ultimately it's just anti-Americanism. It's the idea that like if you're pushing the idea that America is this inherently white supremacist nation that must be destroyed in order for diversity, equity, inclusion to be achieved, you are hurting. You are hurting the cause of a multiracial society. You know, you're the problem. And so this like letting anti-American leftists take over DEI, which because they were the ones who stepped up when we said we need DEI, everybody, we need to hire DEI people. Anti-American leftists, you know, like I'm sure that Robin DiAngelo and Tama Okun would not concede themselves, the two like nice white ladies who run the DEI consulting businesses. I'm sure they would not consider themselves anti-American leftists, but I think that you know, increasingly materials are coming from there. You know, increasingly we're going to see tankies writing DEI shit to basically say, you know, like that anti-Americanism is the key to diversity and inclusion. It's bullshit. It's that is hurting the cause of diversity and inclusion in American society, and yet that's who's stepping up in that space. Yeah. And so, yes, if you want to say that's gone too far, I don't think that's the right language. I think it's just doing the wrong thing. You know.
And that's how you get people like the LGBT marching for Hamas. Like, what the fuck world have we just entered? Like, what are we doing right now? Also, okay, so fuck the very far left people that do this. Okay, obviously, but also I think good share of the blame also goes to conservatives. Fuck conservatives, okay? For too long, this idea that we need to disengage from everything because it's all too woke and blah, blah, blah. No, motherfuckers, you have to participate, right? Like, I would expect I would expect, like, administrators and stuff to start veering off in a crazy direction when all the conservatives are like, well, you know what? We give up on schools. Fuck that. You know, we've been gone from schools for 30, 40, 50 years. You know, it's too far left and blah, blah. Okay, well, sometimes you got to share space with people you don't like. That's called being an American, okay? In the United States, we got a ton of different motherfuckers here. You have to share space with people you don't agree with all the time. And I think in one way, I think that like conservatives unplugging from so many different areas has now allowed these areas to go very, very, very far left as well, which is stupid. So yeah, we need, like, ultimately, as cringe as this sounds, like bipartisanship for the sake of bipartisanship, I think is actually a very important, very American idea. You do need to have people of different political beliefs in the same area, if for no other reason than because they rein in kind of the extremists on both sides. Yeah.
Based rants, gang. No notes. I think you guys covered it. We've solved it. We've saved America. This is from Skill Tree Gaming for $10. So I know the national debt is different than a person's debt, but is there a tipping point where we see real problems? Seeing the system not break during COVID kind of made me care less on debt. This is probably more your wheelhouse here, Noah. What's the answer here?
Debt matters when interest rates go higher than the rate of growth, rate of economic growth. So when you have 5% interest rates, debt does matter. It just starts crowding out other fiscal priorities. Basically, you have to pay all this interest on this debt. It takes a while for that to happen because you have to roll over your past debt. You know, we borrowed when interest rates were like 0%, and now interest rates are 5.5%, 5.3%, and like, you know, that doesn't change the interest the government has to pay like every day. It takes years and years to roll that all over. But once it does, government starts paying 5%. We're growing at like, even optimistically, we're growing at like 3.5%. Very optimistic rate of growth. 5.3% is higher than that. And so what that means is when you have the interest rate higher than the rate of economic growth, it means that the overall government revenues, the revenue base, the tax base is not growing as fast as like the amount that we owe on our debt. Interest costs snowball. So what we have to do then is crowd out other spending. So to spend less on the military to like deter China, we've got to spend less on like social insurance to like take care of old people and medical care and all this stuff. And so then it becomes a problem. So the thing is, if interest rates were to stay high for a long time, it would be a problem. And this is what happened. This is why back in like the early 90s, like Clinton, when Clinton was running for his first election, and Ross Perot was there and all this stuff. It's why they just kept talking about national debt, because at that time, growth was slow, or interest rates were higher than growth, or substantially for years and years, for the entire 80s, basically, as a remnant of the interest rate hikes that we did to beat inflation. And this meant that interest expenses were starting to crowd out other stuff on the federal budget. That's why everyone was a deficit cutter in the early 90s. Late 90s, that faded.
Okay.
Excuse me.
You okay? You good?
Yep.
If you die on my stream, it will be a tragedy, and I probably have to cancel the VOD. That would suck. So please don't die.
Increase engagement numbers.
Last
film.
last question for both of you, right? And I'll go to Destiny first with this one. What is the number one priority, the top thing that America should do today to ensure that it remains a global power into the future? What is the one thing that you think we should hone in on, or stop doing? What's the key here?
Alternative media has been a mistake, okay? We experimented with it, okay? And it failed. I'm so sorry, Noah. That means your job goes away, but my job goes away too, okay? No more alternative media. I think the biggest mistake, the biggest disaster right now that we are facing as a country, and I don't know why, but it even feels more accelerated in America than other places, is alternative media and passive media feeds, meaning when you sit in front of a screen that shows you what you want to see, has caused us to diverge in reality so much. And when you are living in epistemically different worlds, you have lost the ability to communicate to each other. I don't even know how much Americans disagree on anymore. That's like fact or reality based, but rather the disagreement is on these fundamental facts that we don't agree on, and that's a problem. Like, I think that we can have a healthy argument on what should our immigration policy look like, or what should the border look like, but we can't have that when some people think that there is absolutely no problem whatsoever with immigration and it's perfect and fine and we don't need to do anything, and another group of people thinks that, well, didn't 3 million illegals per year actually fully come to the United States and stay here over the past 4 years? And that subject carries over 1,000,000% to every single other topic, right? I think there are really fuck, this sucks too. It sucks because we don't get to have any good conversations. There are so many fascinating conversations that we will never have about COVID. What does an effective lockdown look like? Should we mandate things like masking or vaccines? Should there be 50 different state policies or one federal policy? What should stimulus look like? Who should be allowed to fail? Was the PPP, was that a good idea? Was it a bad idea? There are so many, is the vaccine, rushing into that timetable, was it good? Was it bad? There's so many good conversations that could be had there, digging through the data and figuring out what an effective policy is going forward. But instead, all we are obsessing on is, did China create this in a biolab, weapons grade 5 alpha facility to unleash in the United States population? Do we all have massive strings floating through our body that came from the vaccine that's going to cause us all to die randomly in N+1 years? Because it's never now. It's always going to be 1 year in the future. No. And we can't talk. There's no good conversations because we're all in totally different realities now in terms of how people feel. And that sucks. That has to change. Nothing else can happen going forward until we are at least, even if we disagree on things that are happening, we're kind of living in the same reality, in my opinion.
We have to get rid of your jobs to save America.
True.
New opinion. What do you got? Same question.
What are the big changes we need to make in America?
Number one priority that America should have, right, to change, to stop doing, to start doing, to ensure that we are a global power that is heading towards a bright future.
The number one thing we need to do is start understanding that our allies are allies. People are everyone wanted to get out of the TPP, and they all made up reasons about intellectual property or whatever allowed them to get out, to say the TPP was bad. And in the end, that ceded Asia trade to China.
Yeah.
We are not, we cheer when it's oh wow, our economy grew so much faster than Japan's and Britain's and Germany's. Those are our allies, guys. Those are our friends. We need to start seeing our friends as our friends. We need to start building up. Biden has done a really good job of building up the Quad, which is America, India, Japan, and Australia. It's not an alliance, but it's a budding proto-alliance cooperation framework. We need to cooperate. We need to understand, especially in Asia, these countries that for so long we regarded as economic competitors, like freaking out about Indonesian shoe factories in the 90s, or like freaking out about like Japan buying US steel, some Japanese company. It's not even Japan, it's some Japanese company buying US steel. Because this whole mentality needs to go. The United States is a smaller country than people realize. We have a quarter of the population of China. We are as much smaller than China as Germany is smaller than us. All right. That is the size difference between these countries. We need allies if we're going to stand against China, and we need allies if we're going to resuscitate our industries, because we're not going to bring 100% of industries back to America. There's no, like, the land cost is not there, the labor availability is not there. We can bring some back, and we will, and we should, but we're going to have to do a lot of like friend shoring and ally shoring and near shoring and all that stuff. We need cooperation. We need factories in Japan. We need factories in Indonesia. We need things, India especially, things like this. And we did this during the Cold War. Remember the free world? I'm old enough to actually remember this, but I don't know how many people are old enough to remember that expression we would have of the free world. We need that idea back. And so we need the idea that America is just America alone and goes it alone, which developed after the Cold War, is toxic and poisonous. We need to get rid of that idea and start seeing ourselves as a member of a team of free countries again. Anyway.
On that point too, we need to heal ourselves from the PTSD of Iraq and Afghanistan. Every single fucking time a foreign policy issue comes up, it's always like, what about Iraq? What about Afghanistan? What about Iraq? What about? And it's like, okay, please, fuck. Not everything is Iraq and Afghanistan. Yeah, jeez.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
That's all I got on my end. Anything else you guys wanted to discuss or go over or have talks with? I don't know.
Do you have any big stuff coming up, Noah, that you want to shout out to my?
Well, my big thing is industrial policy. That we're just now embarking on this amazing project of revamping our whole economic policy, trying to figure out what that's supposed to be, and that's a really, really exciting time. So I think the discussions and sometimes battles and sometimes just innovations that define what our new economic policy paradigm is going to be. Reaganomics is out. The idea of like just leave everything to the market is out. What's going to replace that is not known yet. We are starting to put some of the pieces together, but we haven't. There's still just so much that's unknown about that. That is where the action is in terms of like policy and public discussions. That is so far mostly not the subject of bitter partisan battles, because I think both sides realize that we need to do this in some way. And so that is where the interesting stuff is. And if you're looking for those interesting conversations where we just have technocratic conversations about like, how do we do this? How do we actually build a bunch of chip factories? How do we actually, build a bunch of batteries? How do we actually, what kind of other things might we want to build? Where should stuff get built, and how do we encourage this, and how can this revitalize the declining areas of America, like the Rust Belt and like small emptied out towns and stuff like that? And what other policies do we need to support it, like immigration policy? Those conversations are where the interesting like intellectual action is at, and that have not been invaded and subverted yet by crazy partisan screeching. And so I'm excited about that.
Here's like two questions. I'm just curious how you feel about these, and you could take these either one or neither. The two questions I have is, one, I think we talked a little bit about housing policy last time. Do you feel like we're ever going to make progress on that? Because it actually seems intractable in the United States. And then the second one is, do you think the CHIPS Act was a good idea? Are we going to see progress from that? Those two questions. Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, so the answer to those both yes. Actually, I'm very optimistic about both those. On housing, we're starting to see residential construction increase despite the high interest rates, which is a huge win. We are seeing some cities building housing faster than other cities, and rents have been restrained or even sometimes falling in those cities where they're building more housing. We see this clear correlation. We see rafts of YIMBY bills in California, which is the worst NIMBY state. We see YIMBY movements going mushrooming like mushrooms after the rain in cities across America as tech workers motivated by remote work move to Nashville, Denver, Bozeman, Austin, you name it. We see YIMBY movements start to follow them. As in like, we need a place to house this new influx of people so they don't go price regular folks out of their existing houses. And so you see this, it's very encouraging. California is in some sense, went way too far and was with housing restriction, was a trendsetter in the 70s in that bad sense. But California will now be, I think, a trendsetter in the good sense of using state power to restrict local communities' ability to restrict housing. And that is really good. And I think we're going to see more of that. And we're already starting to see some progress, some real material progress in terms of the number of houses getting built and in terms of rents getting restrained in many places in the country.
Can I ask a quick thing on that housing? I'm just so curious.
Yeah.
I don't know if is this a real problem or a fictitious problem? Is there a subsection of Americans who own homes, got to refinance for historically low periods, but are priced out of their homes because the taxes on those homes become too high, or the taxes and insurance become too high? Are these people real? Do they actually exist? Or is this like a fictitious problem completely invented on social media?
If you're an old person with no income except for your investments, and you have an expensive house that is appreciated a lot, and you have to pay a bunch of property tax, you may have to sell that house. That's right.
Do you think this is like because people come on and they act like this is like 40 to 50% of homeowners, that like the increases in tax? You don't think so? Okay, I was curious.
No, it's not that high, but it exists.
Okay, all right, and then CHIPS Act. Do you think good or bad future direction of the country? Good. Okay.
CHIPS Act, very good.
Cool.
It's they're hitting some snags with the implementation of it, but I think that is teaching us how to do this kind of thing. It is a learning how to get around those problems, which we're doing some. So like, there were initially with TSMC's factory that was supported by the CHIPS Act, there were bruising battles with unions about who would do which labor, whether or not Taiwanese employees would come over and teach us how to do it, or whether they would just take it over and do it themselves, how much union labor would be employed. We worked it out. They signed a memorandum of understanding with the university. I've been reading this. TSMC gave some ground, unions gave some ground, and they've actually worked it out. That's pretty cool. And that provides a model for other projects. We're learning how to do that. And in terms of dispersing subsidies, there was this problem because we didn't have enough people who knew how to evaluate grants, so we weren't actually able to spend the money that was allocated. We hired a bunch of people. They've made a lot of effort over the last year to learn how to disperse grants, and now the money's finally starting to go out. Good. We're learning, because remember, people learn over time. Problems that exist on day 1 do not exist on day 1,000. Or much less, because we learn. So
my audience, real quick. Artemis Fowl for $10. This is a statement. I'm curious your response. I love when people simply gloss over why the TPP was impossible to allow to go into effect. It gave corporations the power to sue countries for profit losses. Insanity. What would be your response to that?
It didn't really strengthen the ISDS provision. They already had the ability to do something like that. In actuality, if they just sued countries over that, it would be tossed out. That investor state dispute resolution mechanism was in place before TPP. TPP would have taken a couple things that did not apply to in the intellectual property realm and then apply it to that. People don't seem to understand that thing existed since that exists now. You can still do that. You can still sue, companies can still sue states for enacting protectionist policies under the argument that protectionist policy hurt them. You can do that right now. So people, the amount of misinformation and exaggeration and whatever that existed on, in a very bipartisan sense, because the Trump people and the Bernie people were both pushing essentially similar arguments on this, was just wrong. People don't understand the details of like what these things are about. And what really happened is that people felt like we had given away, people felt anger over NAFTA, anger over even more so trade with China. And they were like, we're in the mood for a win. We're in the mood, a win constitutes blocking a free trade agreement. That was the one they were able to block. That was the one they happened to be able to kill. It's a little like, that doesn't mean free trade has always been good. Obviously, I think trade with China, we did a lot more trade liberalization with China than we should have done. It was a big mistake. But TPP would have helped fix some of those problems. And everyone came up with their own idea own reason to justify getting out of the TPP, and they were wrong. They were making up reasons and disseminating those reasons. And it's like, oh, I heard that TPP would, bring Satan into. No, people, other countries were jumping at the TPP because they're at the, rich countries and poor countries alike were jumping at the chance to sign the TPP because, their domestic politics was not in a place where they needed to scapegoat this agreement. It was stupid to get out of the TPP, but I know I'm never going to be able to reverse the verdict of history on this just by yelling on Twitch stream, because once we did it, cognitive dissonance kicks in and everyone needs a reason to say, oh, of course we made the right decision to get out of that.
Yeah, and like
So
that idea of
reasons,
companies suing countries for policies, like, yeah, there was a big one. I think it was either around the time of the TPP or right before, but it had to do with, I want to say it was rubber manufacturing or something with trees in Canada. I think a U.S. company sued over the fact that Canada, I think they outlawed one particular manufacturing process that only affected the American company there. And I think there was a huge lawsuit. I don't know if this went through in the WTO or whatever, but companies already have the ability to sue countries for things like this or to bring cases, probably in a variety of forms, depending on what multilateral trade agreements you're a part of. And then another thing people don't talk about a lot, I'm more familiar with Vietnam than anything else, but because of the TPP restrictions and because of the labor representation that was there for the TPP negotiations, there were some countries that were actually moving to move their workers into a better, healthier place in an attempt to be adhering to the TPP guidelines. And I know Vietnam was a country that was doing that quite a bit, where they started to make pretty significant changes in their labor force and the rights that would have been afforded to those workers so that they could be compliant with the TPP stuff in order to be a part of that trade agreement. But yeah, all of that basically just got tossed completely, which was stupid, I think. Yeah.
Interesting. A lot of my communities also, can we see your pet rabbit?
People really want to see the rabbit.
Let me go check to see where he is. All right.
Okay, go check.
I don't know where he is. I'll have to go find him.
Rabbit hunt.
Possibility. Hold on. Let me go check.
Okay. Well, this is the #1 request. We got a couple more super chats. I'll wait till he gets back to read them. I think this has been I like this style of discussion. I know a lot of people say it's pretty monologue-y, but
okay. The answer is yes. But I do have to go. So this is the last.
Okay, last thing.
I have to also. I'm gonna unplug my microphone. Okay. And carry my laptop over to the thing.
Will do. Going on a journey, guy. Oh no! It's camera.
Rip.
Can he even hear us? Does he even know? Oh man, let me DM him real quick. Oh no! Yes, excellent.
Oh.
What a cute little bunny.
The red eyes are kind of weird. I don't know if they're actually red or if I'm just seeing. But looks like he said no, but we can't hear you at all. So
yeah, can't hear you one bit. Not even a little. Nope.
Oh, they are red.
Yeah, they look red to me.
That's normal.
Okay. Well, this has been a great discussion. I know you have to go, Noah. Thank you. I can't hear you, but I'm sure you're lavishing us with praise. Gang, Noahpinion. He does a Substack. You should subscribe to it. It's really great. Check it out. Yeah, thanks for coming, Noah.
Yeah, thanks a lot. See you later.
Anything from you, Destiny, before we hit the road?
No, I don't think so. Unless you have any questions or anything.
Nothing from me, but I will see you at the Ohio Canvassing House in a week. So that's going to be fun.
That'll be a thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Peace out, Girl Scouts.
Love you.
Bye.
Bye.